Good evening, Mr. Mayor. This is Marcy. I just wanted to let you know we are live streaming now, so the meeting's ready to go as soon as you are.
Okay, who wants to tell him he's mute?
Thank you. Yeah, I saw Stuart. I saw you and Gordy laughing, and it was like, yeah, thanks, guys. Just keep letting me go. That's great. I was halfway through this meeting.
I was looking at Michael thinking, hey, he's already unmuted, and here you are.
Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. All right, it's 6:30. I'm going to call the order. I'm going to redo the last 5 minutes of my life. Today is Monday, March 22nd. This is the regular council meeting at 6:31 p.m. I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. Today, under 2, we have the approval of the agenda, the near-term, long-term, and regular council meeting agenda. Are there any questions? Seeing none, since there are no objections, the motion before us is that the near-term and long-term agendas be received and that the agenda of the regular council meeting of March 22nd, 2021 be adopted as presented. Are there any objections? Which there wasn't. So the agendas can pass by unanimous consent. And just for our listeners who are just tuning in, we did have a professional parliamentarian give us some advice on how we could be more efficient in our meetings, and hence the reason why we're working on that. Councillor Day, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that the near-term and the long-term agendas need a little bit of work. There's a few items that have been moved. Some were moved to the new date, some were not. There's quite a few things on the long-term agenda that have already been achieved. So they just need a little work.
Mr. Earl, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration will update these for the next meeting.
Great, thank you. There were no in-camera resolutions to be released this evening, so I am going to move on to public participation. We've received 3 written submissions, which have been attached to our agenda, and there are also 3 people who have registered to speak during public participation. We have 20 minutes allocated. What I'm going to do is ask each speaker if they could please keep their comments to 5 minutes. And I'm happy to give you sort of 30 seconds notice when you're getting close to that 5 minutes. So the first person who has registered to speak this evening is Jasmine Alexander. Jasmine, if you hit *6 or #6, that will unmute you, and then you are welcome to share your thoughts.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Alexander, and our address is 3432 Resolution Way here in Colwood. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to let me speak during today's council meeting. I really appreciate that. I'm here today to speak about my concern with the proposed development that I think is identified as 3476 Wishart Road, even though it also impacts the Havenwood Park. And I appreciate that many residents have already shared their concerns, and that council, has asked the developer for some changes to the design. Obviously, we haven't seen what those proposed changes are, and so I just wanted to share my opinion on the development. So in my opinion, any development larger than the current approved zoning would not align with Colwood's community plan. And we bought our house here 5 years ago because of the lifestyle that the neighborhood provides, and are really concerned with any sort of proposed changes to increasing that even further, especially as it will impact the parks around us and also increase the traffic volumes around here, which are already a huge concern. We currently struggle to get out of our subdivision, and any increase in further housing and increased zoning would further just increase that for us, and it's a safety concern at this point. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and that is all I had to add for today.
Thank you very much. One of the things I neglected to say just to all our speakers, if they could please just clearly state their name and their address, just for our record. If you don't wish to state your address online, if you could please email it to staff so that they have it. Moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Jim Hartshorn. Jim, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. It's Jim Hartshorn. I live at 2789 Guyton Way, and I would like to speak, thank you, on the issue 8.8, which is Mr. Molnar's development cost charge for roads. I'd like to say that two things. I was involved with at least 3 meetings, maybe 4, with the people who would be most affected, which was, of course, the developers. And I would say that staff have done a great job at trying to listen and work what we thought were issues into the process and the policy that's been recommended. We support this 100%, and I'm particularly interested in Appendix 6, the DCT credits and the transfer credits, which I really think is a very significant issue. I hope and I'm pleased to know that the CRD have got into that program in the last DCC changes, because credits and transfers of credits are a big part of the development's life, and I think it's what's good for this project, as well as obviously the works to be completed. So we support this and thank staff for giving us a chance for our input. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I know I had a note from staff that Christine Gold had not logged in yet. I'm just checking one final time before I move on.
That is correct. She has not.
Okay, then we will move on to 5 mayor's message. There is no mayor's message this evening. We have a very busy agenda this evening, so we'd just like to keep moving. So we are on 6. This is in regards to adoption of minutes for the regular council meeting of March 8th, and the minutes to receive, which is the Heritage Commission meeting of January 14th. And again, I'm going to go back to the advice that was given to us. So of those 2 minutes, are there any objections or discussions points? Seeing none, the agenda, these minutes can pass by unanimous consent. So moving on to 7 presentations. We have the West Shore Arts Council who will be presenting to us. West Shore Arts Council, I believe there are 2 people registered to speak, and I do have a note, and I saw the individual's name. And Chris, I am not even going to try and pronounce your last name, and I apologize, but I do not want to say it's a challenging name. And Stefan, I see that you're there as well, so I will hand it off to the 2 of you. You guys have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to share screen.
And it's pulsing. It's actually more intimidating to look at.
Thank you. Yeah, it is very intimidating to look at. Could you say it one more time for me?
Pulsing.
Bopolsky. Thank you.
Great. Okay, can you all see the presentation?
We can.
Awesome. All right, Stefan, next slide, please. Thank you all for inviting us to do the presentation this evening. We will be as quick as possible. We wanted to present to you just an update on what the West Shore Arts Council has been up to. We have some questions for you, and I'm sure you have some questions for us. 3 years ago, we updated our mission statement, and really it's about bringing the communities together. Each community in the West Shore is very diverse in how they approach their communities. Art is pivotal in the fabric of our society, and ultimately what the cultures that we live in our different municipalities. So it's very important for us that we continue to give a critical eye to the programming that we engage in. And that's something that we're very committed to. And we're actually in the process in this upcoming fiscal year to update, evolve, again, our mission statement and our programming. Next slide, please. This is to give you an idea of what our financial status looked like a couple of years ago, noting that BCAC operating gave us a good chunk of money. It's the municipalities, View Royal, Colwood, Highlands, and Langford gave us another big portion of funding. And then community gaming gave us some grant funding, corporate sponsors, and some membership dues, along with ticket revenue. Next slide. The reason we showed you that is to just demonstrate our current fiscal year. There's a huge difference in the financial breakdown. BCAC continues to give us a good chunk for operating funding. Langford also gives us funding based on their their population per head. I believe I can't remember the wording exactly, but Highlands and New Colwood continue to support us, as well as the community gaming, corporate donations, and membership dues. It would be remiss for me to not mention that there's a huge chunk of the pie there that is being given to us by BCAC infrastructure money. And COVID is providing all of us with some very challenging times. We've been recently granted the infrastructure money, $75,000 to oversee. We're partnering with a group in the Highlands to create an art studio, and we'll be project managing and overseeing the whole project over the next year or two. Next slide. Just to keep you updated on some of the groups that we brought over, Sing Your Joy, the young, it's a chorus, a choir. They were located downtown Victoria, and now they're in the West Shore. Stefan, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Thanks for inviting us. And yes, Sing Your Joy is a group of musicians. They started in Victoria as with a young adult chorus. They also wanted to set up a chapter in the West Shore. And it's really there to help young adults who are just entering the workforce to make new connections in the community and to do something together. One of the problems, of course, is as soon as they started, COVID crisis took effect, and they've been having to do a lot of their stuff virtually. And they do everything now online, including the practicing and their concerts. But we're hoping that once this crisis is over, that we'll be able to go see their concerts. And they're actually, as I say, they are looking at West Shore as a group, and they're attracting people from all the different communities. Thanks.
Thanks. So Christine, I'm just going to let you know you only have about a minute left.
Okay. We'll blast through this really quickly. Next slide. We continue to support the high schools by giving scholarships. Next slide. Last year, even in COVID, we had performances by The Rising in Langford at the Sarah Beckett Playground. Next slide. We continue to engage with the community. Right now, we're engaging with middle school and high school students to participate in a virtual gallery that we've created on our website. Next slide. Just reference some of our past. We had the concert series, which we are still engaging in a very different way. We are having performers go to the senior homes and perform in their courtyard, so that we still are engaging with some of the vulnerable communities. And just to mention that we do partner with Royal Roads on an ongoing basis. For the 3 consecutive years, we've done the Eleanor Dinsmore series called Dreamers on the Sea. Next slide. And we do create a newsletter quarterly now. Next slide. In the past, we supported primarily the Mother's Day paint-in at Royal Roads. This year, we were going to support them in their 25th anniversary, which has been postponed due to COVID. Next slide. And just to give you a brief rundown of our current projects that we have on the go, Light Up the Hills, which is in the West Hills, Sing Your Joy, which Stefan mentioned, they are a choir that came on to the West Shore, the virtual gallery, the Royal Roads Anniversary, the Mary Lake Studio that I mentioned, When Raven Speaks, which is a coloring book that we are going to be producing with Indigenous art, local artists, and the concert series that will continue. And next slide. And we continue to look for board members. And that's it. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we've got 5 minutes for questions. So I will go to council. Council, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wonder if both of our presenters could tell us what community you live in.
Oh,
Yes.
are you talking?
Yes.
I live in Saanich.
Saanich. And Stefan?
I live in Langford, just down the street from Colwood.
Okay. And how many board members do you have?
We currently have 4 board members, and Stefan is my chief operating officer.
Yeah.
And how many do your bylaws require?
Stefan, do you remember what the bylaw is? We do. We're meeting the bylaw. I don't remember off the top of my head what that is.
No,
That's all right. And what were your expenses for the last 2 years?
our expenses, let's see now, they're about $100,000 a year. In the last year, a lot of our projects were delayed. So there have been, I think last year we came up to about 30,000. Yeah, 30,000. So, but the projects were, for example, like the Indigenous coloring book that Christine mentioned, that one we're doing the planning right now because the Indigenous communities did not feel comfortable having group meetings during the crisis. So we're going to be planning it. So as soon as the crisis is lifted, we're going to start with that project.
And of the $100,000, how much of that was salaries?
24,000.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Yes, I have about 4 questions here. I noticed that just looking at your charts there, you don't have a lot of really recurring revenue per se. It's a lot of it's grants, and even what we do as a city, it's a grant, and so there's very little transactional revenue, i.e. fees for going to events. Like it's a tiny portion. Is part of your strategy try to raise that right now? Because the rest of it looks pretty iffy. Like it seems to be at the will or whim of wherever you're sticking your hands out, be it BCAC or City of Langford, or Colwood, or the City of View Royal.
We're currently in the process of re-examining how we do business as well as our financial structure or foundation. And that is a very good point. That is a very good point.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, Langford is grant and aid, so we are written into the annual budget. So that is a regular income. And BCAC, yes, we apply, but we're a well-known entity there.
Okay. Yeah, you're grant and aid also from Colwood too. So, but that is, that's pretty iffy.
But now we're applying for it. Right, that's the difference.
No, it's pretty iffy sort of revenue to depend on that, right? To me, that's just my viewpoint. It's nothing that you can really count solidly on because the city's going through troubles, and the grant need may not be as big, sort of thing. So that's the only point I was making.
Yeah, that is something that we're examining because as you mentioned, COVID has demonstrated that we need to be more flexible, more nimble, and that does count our financial status or foundation.
Okay. And I did notice that of the $100,000 expenses that you have, 24,000 goes towards your salaries. Is there other overhead that goes with it? Do you like rent office space or whatever? So what is your overall, what percentage is your overall overhead cost to your expenses right now, your fixed overhead costs? Do you have any?
The only thing that we have is we actually became completely virtual in COVID. We did rent a space in Langford, but that's completely non-existent. So the only thing that we do rent that would be overhead is a storage container or storage unit.
So about 75% goes to putting on the events then. Is that the right split then?
Yep.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair thing. And just as far as events go, like I just looked at your posters there, and it looks like, I mean, and rightfully so, a lot of them would be in Langford because they contribute the most. But if you had to look at everything that you do, how much goes to Langford, how much goes to Colwood, how much goes to View Royal? Do you try to balance that proportionately, or?
Actually, I can speak to that because not all the municipalities give to us anymore, specifically Metchosin and Colwood. And we still participate. We still support when Metchosin Day starts up again. We actually provide the artists and we pay the artists. We are looking to have an exhibition in View Royal as well. Stefan, I don't know if we track the actual expenses per municipality, but we do track the expenses per event that we have.
Okay. So, but you said that Colwood doesn't give you grant and aid anymore? I thought we did.
No, I said View Royal and Metchosin.
Oh, View Royal and Metchosin. Okay, thank you. And my last question is, I'm just trying to specifically understand your role here. So you're the organizer of the events, and that is your primary mission then? Okay, so could you explain that quickly to us right now, what your primary mission is? Because that didn't come out in your slides.
Yeah, what we do primarily is we partner with local artists to provide them with a venue so that they can share their art, as well as support them financially. It's very important for us to make sure that, I'll give you an example. CRD will not support the local artists. They will support not-for-profits, but they will not support Stinking Fish. The Stinking Fish tour just closed, and they donated a bunch of their money back to us because we've supported them in the past. So we do partner with a lot of Mother's Day Paint-In, for example, if you ever attended it, all of the musical acts, all of the painters were paid and organized by the West Shore Arts Council.
Okay, I got a clearer understanding. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands. Very much like to thank you two for coming and sharing a little bit about what you're doing at the West Shore Arts Council. It's very much appreciated. Thank you tonight.
Yeah. Could I ask one question while we're here? I just want to ask.
I can't promise you an answer.
Okay. I understand that Colwood is building a new municipal offices, and there's going to be a cultural component to it. I'm wondering, am I going too fast?
Yeah, you are. We have not even looked at a new city hall, let alone art component to the building. So that is very, very premature.
Yeah, because we're supporting, of course, Judith Collington and her effort there. So thought I'd throw that in.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Council, I'm going to move on now to new business. So the first is 8.1. This is 3322 Fulton Road, the proposed daycare. There is a recommendation from the March 15th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Jansen.
I'll move the recommendation from committee, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi, I'm assuming you're seconding that. Okay, I'm going to clear everybody's hands. I'm going to wait for a moment for staff to put up the motion so that we can all see it on screen. And while I'm waiting on that, is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any hands for discussion, so I am going to call the question. Those opposed to the motion? Nobody opposes. So we move on. Thank you. So that motion passes unanimously. Moving on to 8.2, this is the West Shore Transit Priority Project update. This was a recommendation from the March 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. May I have a mover and seconder, please, to the motion? Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Day. Staff, don't worry about putting the motion up unless there's going to be discussion. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 8.3, this is Mr. Russell with our Public Works. He's our Public Works Service Coordinator, and this is in regards to our growing rabbit population. Mr. Russell.
Thank you, through the chair, Mayor Martin, for the opportunity to speak tonight. So after our last discussion with council, we were tasked with gathering more information about potential control methods for rabbits. And so we've looked into a number of examples throughout the province and identified a number of possible routes that the city may want to look at based on other organizations, either success or not success with it. And one really key thing we've identified is the need to consult a biologist before we make any decisions to move forward. And so that's essentially why we're here tonight, to gain council's approval or not approval to move further and work with a biologist.
Great, thank you. Mr. Baxter, I will go to you first, or Councillor Baxter.
You said that before I'd even pressed the button.
Well, because I had a heads up from a staff member that you were going to be making a motion.
Okay, I think we've been provided with great information here. And I love the stuff from Richmond that really tells quite a tale. The option that we've been given, I think, is a little bit vague given all the background we've been given. So, you know, for instance, the idea of capturing and neutering and releasing on site doesn't seem like a great option, because it would take an awfully long time to reduce the number of rabbits. You'd have to have some die of old age. So I've come up with a resolution that I hope council will find matches what their ambitions would be. So can we put that up on the screen and I'll read it out? That staff,
yeah, we can.
Great. That staff be directed to engage the services of a registered professional biologist to advise on the following. 1, the scale and scope of the rabbit problem in Royal Bay. 2, the type and likely source of the rabbits. 3, the estimated cost and likely efficacy of encouraging raptors. And 4, the estimated cost and likely efficacy of trapping, euthanizing, and supplying the rabbits to wildlife organizations or similar as food for their animals. That's it.
Thank you. So, Councillor Day, I see your hand up. I'm putting it down just for a moment. I will come back to you, but I am looking for a seconder in regards to this motion. And I will second it for us to move it along. Discussion. Councillor Baxter, did you have anything to discuss further to this?
The only thing I want to say is that I hope that this produces a more focused amount of work from the biologist. I think if we're too vague in what we ask the biologist to do, we're going to get a consequently bigger bill.
Thank you. I will, as a seconder, I will pass. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I think that it is a good motion. I was happy with the more vague motion, but this may lead to a better result. But I think and it certainly will be resolved through this motion, but there may be a considerable difference in that I believe that the rabbit population in Royal Bay may actually be a native species. At least they've been here as long as I've been here, and I have had a lot of experience with domestic rabbits being dropped off in the neighborhood, and these are not them. These are a different type of rabbit that I at least have been led to believe is native, and so we do need to look at that potential as well, and biologists will provide it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
Just a question there, Councillor Baxter, why you didn't include the possible cost and likely efficacy of relocating, trapping and relocating rabbits?
Okay, if I can answer that, I think the problem is you're just relocating the problem. Now, if the biologist says that these are native rabbits and you can relocate them anywhere without a permit, then we might go in that direction. But from reading the material we were given, the Ministry of Wildlife doesn't seem very keen on the idea of relocating any rabbits.
If I may, I suspect you're right, but before we start killing little bunnies, we should at least see if there's another home for them. So I'm wondering if we couldn't add a fifth item to this to at least explore that possibility. You may be 100% correct. It turns out to be not practical, but for me, I would think explore.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you, Councillor Parkinson. You're gonna need to make an amendment then, or make a motion to that amendment, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would move that we add number 5 to the motion to say the estimated cost and likely efficacy of trapping and relocating the rabbits.
Okay, we're going to wait until it gets typed. Then what I will do is look for a seconder, and then I will look for a discussion on the amendment. Councillor Day, are you wishing to speak to it, or are you seconding it?
I'm seconding.
Okay, so I'll just hold on until it's written. Councillor Parkinson, is that it?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I have Councillor Day who has seconded that. Their discussion on the amendment. I'm not seeing any hands, so I will call the question on just the amendment. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. So staff, can you please remove the word amendment and just, there you go. Excellent, thank you. So that brings us back to the main motion. I am sorry, I deleted everybody's hands. If anybody does wish to speak to the main motion again, please put up your hand. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Just a quick question. So I guess I would have thought the first question is actually, was kind of obvious, but regardless, I don't know where this comes in, Mayor, but another issue that comes out of this whole thing is the if they're to find that these rabbits are ones that have been released because they were pets, we have another issue here too, because it's pretty clear that feral rabbits you can pretty well trap and euthanize if you had to. But if I don't know what the local bunnies are, and I still don't understand. I thought we understood what the problem was, and I'm still trying to figure out what the registered professional biologist is. I guess what my biggest fear here is that how long is this going to take? People have been complaining about this, and it's not getting any better. If not, they're into that season where a lot of them are having babies, and the problem's just going to be bigger. So, it's a timing issue. So I'm just asking the questions right now.
Yeah. So Councillor Kobayashi,
yes.
I guess where I would sit is if this motion passes, that would give staff direction to actually go out and figure that out. And I would expect that staff would come back at the next meeting to report back on a timeline on when these things could be accomplished, because at this point, staff don't have this direction, so they wouldn't have done the work to answer your question, unfortunately.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other hands? I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition to the motion, please raise your hand. Nobody opposes. Moving on then to 8.4. This is Sandra Russell, our Manager of Corporate Communications in regards to beach food logistics for 2021. Ms. Russell.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So as you know, the city strives to create welcoming and interesting places, public spaces that encourage recreational, social, cultural opportunities. And one of our key areas of focus is the Colwood waterfront. And beach food events are one of the activities that support that. So it's time again for us to think about how the program will be set up this year. There's a growing amount of interest from food vendors to participate in this program. We have about 30 expressions of interest on our online forum from vendors. So I'm looking for direction on a number of issues. And there are 5 things. The start date that we should choose. Traditionally, it runs from May till September. Both members of the public and vendors have expressed interest in beginning earlier if that was a possibility. We've seen a growing number of people enjoying the waterfront on a regular basis. In the past, we started it in May mostly because the weather was more pleasant and more people were there. But I think what we're seeing is that there's a captive audience down there almost all the time who would likely take advantage of food opportunities. The second part is traditionally we've done it on Friday, Saturday, and last year during the pandemic we added Sunday. So direction from council on whether we want to continue with those 3 days or consider offering it more often throughout the week. The number and location of vendor spots for this year, considering the pandemic, you know, traditionally we've had it in that one location with music, and it's really been an event and a gathering. And this year, when we don't want to be promoting gatherings, we may wish to expand the number of spaces or at least extend them along the waterfront to keep people more separate. So that's the other piece. And then the last piece is about whether we should consider having musical performances this summer with the event. So those are the things we're looking for direction on. You have the report in front of you. Maybe I'll leave it at that. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Excellent. So council, I'm going to look for general questions to begin with. And then what I would like to do is I'm going to lead the discussion through the 5 points. So the first we'll talk about is the start date of the beach. And then I'll work us through that to try and build a consensus. And then ideally, if I have a consensus, what I would like to do is just build one motion at the end, which will incorporate all the answers to the 5 questions. We'll do that. So I'm seeing several hands up. I'm seeing 4 hands up. So this is going to be before we begin discussing the 5 questions, council, just so that you're aware. So do not start talking about specific dates or days and all that. So Councillor Jansen, you're first, then Dave, Parkinson, then Kobayashi. Councillor Dave.
Well, I was just going to leap right into that discussion.
Excuse me, Councillor Jansen.
Take my hand down if someone has questions.
Okay, Councillor Day. Questions for Ms. Russell?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to know what the latest health instructions are from our medical health officer with COVID, because I think it is important to support healthy outdoor activities, but it's also really important that we are setting a good example.
So I'm gonna leave. Sorry, Mrs. Russell. I'm gonna jump in just because I had a direct conversation with Dr. Richard Stanwyck. Dr. Stanwyck said to me directly that he was supportive of the food trucks. He was also supportive of music. This was about a month ago, though. So again, keep in mind that the environment was changing. A month ago, he said he was not supportive of singing. that the music, he was fine with music, but he's not supportive of droplets being spread through the singing. So he encouraged the food trucks on the activities, and he supported us having the music. But a month ago, he did not support singers. Ms. Day, or Councillor Day, excuse me.
Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of general comments. Firstly, I'm assuming that we can leave final details to staff as things evolve with the COVID. As you said, no singing but music is good. So, you know, I've got some thoughts here on when to start stuff, but frankly, it all depends on what the public health orders of the day are. And so we can say, here's what we'd like to do, and staff stay on top of public health and see what we can actually do. And the second thing, as far as food trucks, and this might be stepping on your toes a little bit, Your Worship, but I would think there's probably some premier spots versus less premier spots. I'm thinking, you know, adjacent to the washrooms here, and you know, that are quite close to this neighborhood. So some may have to be, as we have multiple food trucks, may have to be some guidance on who gets the primo spots and who gets the less primo spots. But again, that's not something council needs to debate. We just need to dump all that stuff onto Sandra and let her deal with it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Oh, sorry, Ms. Russell, do you want to comment?
I'll just let you know that this year we are moving to a rotation where we will be creating a seasonal schedule by selecting vendors randomly from the whole pool, so that we can curate a set of vendors each week. And so I hadn't thought about that, Councillor Parkinson, that if we spread it out, we'll want to also balance that piece so that people get equal time in preferred spots, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Just a general question I have, because it's appropriate for the questions that have to be answered here. And that has to do with all our brick and mortar restaurants along the strip, along Island Highway. Basically, you know, you're losing some of that revenue with people using the food trucks. I don't have issue with that, and I don't think any of them have issue with it, as long as it's done fairly. So my question is, have we come up with the magical formula now that so it's fair, so they're being charged appropriately instead of some just nominal fee that comes out of the air? Do we have a magical formula now that we sort of say, in all fairness, you know, you've got this many square feet or whatever the formula may or may not be, and sort of say, here's the fee for doing this now. And it's just to be fair with our brick and mortar businesses, which pay taxes. And that leads to my second part of my question, which is the monies that we do earn from the trucks being there, does that go into general revenue? Because it is like taxation money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. So in terms of fees, staff's plan was to maintain our traditional fee of $300 for a permit, simply because it's, you know, as the pandemic continues, it's a challenging time for food trucks. And then we propose to review that permit rate for next year. We are aware that other areas in the region charge significantly more than we do for this opportunity. So the other piece about supporting businesses, I think we also have to look at the aspect of this event drawing people from around the region who are coming up Island Highway and maybe being exposed to some of the businesses in a way that they wouldn't be. So a little bit of a balancing factor for those brick and mortar businesses. Also at the event, we've traditionally provided sponsorship opportunities and signage to some of our major food and retail businesses, so that we're trying to, you know, use the event to promote those brick and mortar businesses. You know, small concessions, but a real effort is being made to do those things. So often we've had booths or coupons from our other eateries in Colwood and things like that. So a conscious effort to support them in any way we can through this.
So just the last part of the question. So do the fees, those $300 that we collect off of everyone, do they actually go back into general revenue or not?
Right. So
yeah, Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Russell, you can answer it, or I also have Ms. Hempting, who's put up her hand.
Okay, I just
So
wanted to say that in the past, the revenues have generally been applied to compensating the musicians who have paid at the event. It's been a sort of a balance out factor. But Jen may have other information to add about how we budget for this.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Just to add to what Ms. Russell just mentioned, these revenues offset related operating expenditures, which include amounts that are paid out to musicians at the events.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Kobayashi? No? Okay. So Council, I would ask that you just bear with me. I'm just going to go through the 5. So we're going to do it a little informally more and just try and have a discussion date and then try and build a motion. So the first discussion point that we need to discuss is the start date for the beach food season. I will just propose, and I did speak to staff about this, that it would seem appropriate that possibly we could look as early as Easter, which would be April 2nd, which is Good Friday. That would be the first day that we could theoretically introduce food trucks. It seemed like that would be a natural fit because that's a long weekend. But again, that's just me throwing it out there. More than open to hearing if people wish to push that back further into May or other dates. Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship.
Then Dave, then Baxter.
Certainly, I think if the food trucks are indicating that they can appear and staff up for that weekend, then I think we should accommodate them.
Great, thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I have some concerns about constantly monetizing the waterfront. I don't want people to feel that they can't go there if they don't have money to spend. I think that starting in May, as we did previous years, would help to balance that out.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baxter?
I support the Easter start date.
Okay. I'm going to informally, I know Councillor, because we can go back and forth and Councillor Day has also suggested that she would be more comfortable in May. I'm going to just suggest the April, so we would look at beginning Friday, April 2nd. So may I get a mover and seconder for that, I guess, and I'll call a vote on that one. So that is moved by Councillor Jansen, second by Councillor Logan. Is there any other discussion on that one? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. So moving on to the second question is the days of the week vendors will be permitted to offer food for sale at the waterfront. Last year, this is just a reminder, last year, as Ms. Russell mentioned, it was Friday, Saturdays, and then we expanded it to Sunday. Council, what's your desire this year? Councillor Baxter?
I'm somewhat mildly opposed to this, mainly for similar reasons that Councillor Day expressed.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, Councillor Baxter. As in, sorry, we're looking at the number of days. So, like, I'm not sure what you're opposing.
But is it opposing expanding the number of days? Sorry, I thought you were actually saying.
Oh no, sorry. I'm just looking for a suggestion on how many days we would like.
Okay, 3 days.
You want to go Friday? Okay, so Councillor Baxter has suggested Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Logan, did you want to second it or did you?
I'll second it and I support that. And I would also include maybe stat holidays.
Okay. Michael, are you comfortable with that just being added to the
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. So the motion that we have before us would be that it would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and stat holidays. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. 3, the number of vendor spots provided on each of those days. Ms. Russell, can you confirm with council right now, was it 4 that we did last year?
Traditionally, yes, it's been 4 vendor spots, all co-located near the temporary washrooms closer to the bridge end.
Okay. Councillor Day.
I'd like to propose that we do 5, but put them farther apart.
Okay. Do I have a second? Councillor Baxter, you have your hand up. I will come back to you, but I'm going to lower it just for a second. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Baxter seconds it. Councillor Baxter, Councillor Day, did you want to discuss it any further?
Just that I think it's really important when we've had it before. I think it's important that it doesn't look exactly the same as when we did it before, to emphasize that we're still needing to work on social distancing, and the closer we are together, the more I think we have a tendency to just revert to our previous patterns. So just to make it really clear to everybody that we're trying to do this differently.
Right. So I'm going to. I see 2 other hands, but and I think this is solving some issues for us, Councillor Day. So I don't have an issue with this. But you kind of addressed issue 4, which was the locations. But that's great that you've spread them out. So let's. I'd just like to be a little more precise, or actually maybe Ms. Russell, is that enough direction for you, that spread out, or do you want us to define what spread out is for you? Will you want something in the motion that says that they need to be at least 100 meters apart, or?
I think there would be other deciding factors. For example, we would want to have adequate parking and likely a fairly clear access to the beach. So I think it will be sort of self-evident where we would space out to. So I think having council define that, unless you have specific thoughts about co-locating with something else, I think we're good.
Okay, great. Then I will go to hands up, Councillor Baxter, then Logan.
Yeah, I think I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but yeah, I wanted to go to 5 because it's 1 more than we had last time. I don't think we should increase too quickly, but we could get to more later.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. I can support 5 as well. I guess my expectation is that when we're looking at spacing, we're not spacing from Lagoon Road to the bridge, taking into account people with young kids or mobility issues that may want to see what's available and go back and forth and maybe visit even a couple of the food trucks. So just want to be sensitive to that aspect too.
Thank you. So it looks to me like I've got a motion that gives us 5 vendor spots, and the location I think has been answered on question 4. So I'm going to call the question on this one, and I think I can address question 3 and 4 through this specific motion. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, that motion passes. And then finally, the last question, whether musicians, well, maybe we're getting magicians this year, who knows? Whether musicians should be invited to perform for 2021. Councillor Jansen.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. As much as I would like to have music and singing and what have you down there, I do believe this is not the time for this. And I think we'll quickly find that there's such a void in events out there that it'll become perhaps too busy and too crowded. So I think we might be pushing the envelope a tad. However, I am highly confident as well that if said orders change, that Sandra can quickly adjust and organize something. So I would be opposed to this at this time, with the caveat that as these orders change, that we allow Sandra the flexibility to adjust accordingly.
Did you want to, thank you, Councillor Jansen, did you want to hear, I have 3 other councillors wishing to speak. Do you wish to hear them, or do you wish to move that motion now?
I know there's a right answer here, but so why don't we, I will go ahead and make that motion that we limit to food service only at this time with no entertainment, and add the caveat that as the health orders change, we can adjust.
Okay, so I have Councillor Dade, Logan, and then Parkinson on my list. So I will be coming back to you guys. Just got to clear your hands for a moment. Do I have a seconder to Councillor Jansen's motion? And thank you so much for participating. Oh, no, I do. Councillor Kobayashi has seconded it. Okay, so I do have a motion. So I will go back to Councillor Kobayashi. Since you're the seconder, you do have an opportunity to speak first before I go to Councillor Day.
It sounds good. What Councillor Jansen makes a lot of sense to me.
Excellent, thank you. So then I have Councillor Day, Logan, and Parkinson. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I do understand the issue with singing. However, I do think that the droplets could be mitigated by location. There's lots of, but there's also lots of other arts that could be enjoyed without coming too close. Whether you were talking about a magician or a dancer or any number of other performance-related art that could be not necessarily advertised, but present, something interesting that you would see at the lagoon when you're there that you didn't come there specifically to see, but that made your day better. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councillor Logan, then Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not going to compliment Councillor Jansen like Councillor Kobayashi did, but I will say, you know, I won't support the motion. I think it's a bit redundant in that if the health orders prohibit this type of activity, it's not going to happen anyway. So I would like to see staff investigate some possibilities to allow singing and musicians happen down there. It's a key element, I think, to beach food, and everybody enjoys it. They need that outlet. And I think if there are opportunities to minimize risk, specifically with the musicians, then we should at least explore that opportunity. And if the health authority says go with these 5 recommendations as an example, then I think we should try it.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, then Baxter.
Yeah, ditto to Councillor Logan. I think Councillor Jansen has his heart in the right place, but he's just put the motion backwards. Obviously, everything we do down there has to comply with public health orders, and I have complete faith in Sandra and the rest of the staff to stay on top of those. And if and when we can get musicians down there, to get musicians down there. But you know, if the rules say no musicians, there won't be any musicians down there. And if the rules say musicians down there, they probably say musicians everywhere. So Dean's concern about the whole town coming to our beach because we're the only place with musicians and overloading it might be a little overboard. So I would instead, when we dispense with this backwards motion, I'd be happy to move that we do have musicians if and when allowed by the public health officer, and leave that discretion up to our staff.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I really want to put in a word for singing magicians.
All right. Actually, that was a good one. I'm going to stop this conversation. So right now we have a motion, which basically is that musicians should not be invited to perform in 2021. Councillor Jansen, I would like to call the question, but you put your hand up again.
Thank you.
Did you want
to? One, I had it up and then you put it down.
Well, because I was going to call the question.
Agree with pretty much everything that's been said. My only concern is the risk, the reputational risk. Does everybody remember the photos that emerged when that park was one of the few in the region that was still open, and the masses of people that appeared there out of nowhere, uninvited, when they found out that it was still open. So I love where this is going. I would like to see singing, juggling magicians. But the bottom line is, what's our, until I see a plan that mitigates groups of people standing, because if we have something for people to stand and look at, people are going to stop and look. And that's going to turn into a crowd. And then where's our responsibility in that regard? So I would suggest that I hate to say it, if we're just relying on everybody's good goddamn sense, that we might just be opening ourselves up to some criticism. And that's the conclusion of my thought.
All right, so I'm going to call the question now. So the question, the motion was that musicians should not be invited to perform in 2021. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillor Logan, Councillor Day, Councillor Parkinson, Mayor Martin oppose. So that motion fails. I am looking for a new motion. Councillor Parkinson. Oh, unmute Councillor Parkinson.
Sorry,
See, I didn't leave you hanging out there for 5 minutes just talking. And
I got all excited. I got excited when all Michael Baxter on you. I would move that musicians be invited to perform in 2021, and that this, as all aspects of this recommendation, be subject to public health orders.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Day and Logan, you both have your hands up. Day, Councillor Day, are you first? Are you seconding it? Yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
yeah.
So, yeah, okay, great. Councillor Parkinson, do you wish to speak to it again?
No, I think we've spoken enough here.
Okay, Councillor Day, you're the seconder.
I'm all good.
Thank you. And Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Just thinking of what Councillor Day had said, it sort of struck a chord with me, actually. The idea of exotic dancers, dancers, or, different types of art forms. Great idea. Why not? I think it's a great idea. So,
exotic dancers.
Okay, for the record,
I don't know where that came from. I was thinking of the exotic animals, right? Sorry, but dancers, like different types of art forms. I like what you said, Councillor Day. I must admit, and maybe some type of different thing down there besides music might be not a bad idea. Something that they can work with the West Shore Arts Council on. I don't know. I'd go down and see different things like that. Aside from just going down and listening to music. That's nice occasionally, but it's just, I don't know. It just struck a good chord with me. So, I would suggest that we would amend this or I don't want to amend it, I guess, but it's, I like the music idea, but to explore the ideas of other types of things that we can do down there. Aside from musicians, Sandra?
Yeah. So, Councillor Kobayashi, I'm not going to probably look for a motion, but I think that's good direction from staff. Or I think staff would. I think Ms. Russell is shaking her head, so I think she could definitely look at other acts outside of just the standard musician. Right. And I'm sure she could be quite creative with it.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Good suggestions. I'm going to call the question on this. And the motion, we've all heard the motion. So any in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillor Jansen opposes. And we all look forward to Councillor Logan's interpretive dance routine that he's going to be presenting in late May. So.
It won't be quite as exotic as Doug is hoping for, but anyways, I'll try my best.
Thank you. Ms. Russell, is there anything else that you need?
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you. We're a little punchy tonight. 8.5. Oh, excuse me. Nope, that's all right. 8.5. This is from Ms. Lalande, our intern corporate officer. This is in regards to record management update. This was just for council's information. We're not looking for a motion. It was just there for information. I am going to move on unless I see a hand for any questions in regards to 8.5. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wondered, since the records management has been undertaken, I don't think we've had any information about what's being retained. I wonder if we could get an update, not tonight, but at a future date, about the types of information that the city is keeping, just so that we are all on the same page.
Great. I think staff could easily bring that back to a future council meeting for you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to move on to 8.6. This is Mr. Downton, our Manager of Information Technology, regarding the Municipal Business Process System request for proposal. Mr. Downton.
Good evening to the chair. Thank you, Mayor. We had an RFP for a municipal business system that closed on February 5th, and a panel was struck with corporate services, development services, and IT. And we had 3 proposals. The proposal we're recommending tonight is from Central Square. It's Tempest. Tempest is the most commonly used software in all of BC. And what it does is sort of a single pane of glass. So if a citizen comes in and gives their address, we should be able to tell them every interaction that they've had with the city, whether it's calls for service on their property, bylaw infraction, taxes, any permitting. So currently we don't have any software that does that. So that's what's driving the need. You had a budget in your 2020-25 financial plan for $300,000. None of the proposals came in close to that. So what we're asking for tonight is amendment to the budget. The ask this year would be 395, and then in 2022 an additional 68. So and we're proposing to fund that through the COVID Restart Grant. And another grant opportunity has actually come up that we just became aware of last week. So we'll be pursuing that, and that's a possibility as well. We have a fairly ambitious plan for this year. It would be getting a land database going, and then calls for service, business licensing, inspection module for the building with mobile inspections, permitting for planning, engineering, development services. And then in September, when the tax season's over, we'd implement property tax so that we'd be ready to do that in 2022. Once that's in place, that sort of creates the building blocks to offer some online services for the public. So the following year, we'd like to start up a My City portal where citizens will be able to log in, track their permit applications, do online payments. And also another portal called Our City, where residents can see development activity that's happening in their neighborhood or across the city. And we get to choose what we disclose there, but it's about being transparent in what development's happening in the neighborhood, and everyone can see what's going on down the street when they see shovels in the ground. And finally, we would do mobile calls for service in 2022 as well, which would allow staff just to tend to calls out in the field and do all that on their cell phone. So there's no paper to carry around, and everything's entered in the system in real time. It'd be a fairly resource intensive endeavor, so particularly with IT. So I think there's a recognition that needs to be made there that we need to have the bodies in place to do this and be successful. And, I should note that my first crack at municipal government was implementing Tempest 13 years ago. And so I've done this once before, and I can picture all the steps that we need to take. And I certainly see the need for Colwood to have this a system like this in place. So I hope council is considers this recommendation.
Thank you. So I have 3 hands up. I would go to, it's Councillor Day, then Jensen, then Baxter. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I'm just, I guess I'm a little confused because this is a significant increase. It's about 1.5 times what we were anticipating it would cost to do this. And whether or not this is the right time to do it is really up in the air for me. I know that it brings a lot of functionality. I have thoroughly reviewed your report, but when I looked up this business online just to do a little bit of extra homework to understand what sort of programming they would be offering us, I didn't find a whole lot. And in fact, there's been a lot of mergers, and this company is really only merged into existence from about 3 others just a couple of years ago. So I'm just wondering if you think it's worth it, why you think it's worth it, and how reliable the company is.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Tempest started off in Surrey in the 1990s, I believe, and they were acquired by Stardyne, and Stardyne was acquired by another company, and they were acquired by Central Square. So Central Square has gobbled up a lot of the municipal business software. I have a lot of confidence that Tempest will continue because they have such a large BC base. City of Vancouver, City of Surrey, City of Victoria. I think their stat is 86% of tax notices in BC are sent through Tempest. So they have a real big development footprint in the province. And it's certainly a consideration because there's so much work to get the implementation done that you want to make sure you're choosing something that's going to be around for the long haul. They would say that they've never lost a client yet, which is true. And I think what makes it worth it is once it's installed, it's so configurable by the end user, the staff, that we won't need to go back to them for further work, where a lot of the other options that were presented required custom programming whenever you need to make a change. So in the RFP, we were looking for something that staff could configure themselves, that touched every area of the business, including property tax. And even though the budget has increased significantly, Tempest was the least expensive of the 3 proposals, and the only one that actually fulfilled all the requirements we were looking for in the RFP. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, I think so. Just seems like their last merger was in 2018, but if you have faith in them, I'm just really wondering why we weren't more aware of what this would cost. You know, we estimated our costs at 300,000. It's come in at over 1.5 times. Right. Yeah, I can't speak to how the 300,000 number came to be. That was before my time. I can say that out of the 3 proposals we had, this was the least expensive and the one that delivered the most functionality. So that's what we're recommending to go with. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jansen, then Baxter.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. I will clear hands. Do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Logan has seconded it. I will go to Jansen, then Logan, then Baxter. Councillor Jansen, do you wish to comment any further?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This is something that this community needs, especially in the phase of growth that we're in right now. People are expecting to do more and more interactions with the community online, and it's high time that we get cracking on this. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, as the seconder.
Just to say that we've been kicking the can down the road for many, many years on any kind of technology that would assist staff and our residents. So I think the grant has really enabled this opportunity. And I appreciate, Mark, that we could be in line for another grant as well to help cover this cost. So I'm glad we're moving down this road. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, then Kobayashi, then Parkinson. Councillor Baxter. Oh, very good. You stopped yourself.
I completely support what Councillor Jansen and Councillor Logan said. But I just want ask staff a question. Can you speak to the link between this and GIS?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Baxter, and through the chair. There's complete integration between, currently we have a web map with Esri that's hosted in the cloud. We could have that on premise, but either way, there's direct linkage. So when someone creates a property, that can pull up on the map, or vice versa. If someone has a property selected on the map, or multiple properties, that will go back and pull those properties up in the land database. So so complete functionality there. And as far as the land database goes too, it links with BC Assessment and LTSA, so we get monthly updates. So it's always the most current. Whenever there's any activity on properties, that'll always be loaded in with monthly updates. So we'll have the most complete current records there.
Thank you. And how soon can we actually have all this?
If we have a recommendation from council to go ahead tonight, then the next step will be just to have a quick legal review of the contract, and then we're ready to sign. We could start implementing as soon as 6 weeks from now. So
wonderful, wonderful.
So our goal is to have everything I listed off in place for December this year for sort of the base, and then we'll start layering on the web services in the beginning of next year. So
wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Quick question here for you, Mark. Actually, I had 3 questions. Now I only have 2. Thank you, Councillor Baxter, for asking if it was compatible with GIS. My next question is, has the capital cost has gone up considerably, as pointed out by Councillor Day. I'm going to ask about the under the iceberg tip costs. How about the maintenance and operating costs? Is there going to be an increase in that also, because they were estimated also? So is there a change in those costs now?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through the chair. The maintenance is based on each module you purchase, so it's basically a 20% charge of whatever the initial license was. So in terms of maintenance in 2021, we're looking at $25,000 per year, and that'd be prorated based on when we start. It would go up to $31,000 a year in 2022. But we would retire some existing software that we use currently that would save about $15,000. So the net would be about $16,000 a year more than what we're currently paying.
Okay. And the last question I have, you obviously probably already did your homework on this one, or you wouldn't have had it on here as a recommendation, but I understood that our COVID restart grant money was all spoken for, but is there money left over in the pot for this? I don't know. Could you answer that question?
Yeah, so I have Ms. Hempting hammed up, so that's a perfect question. She should be able to answer that for us.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Kobayashi, thank you for the question. So I've got a few things I wanted to comment on. One, the use of the COVID Safe Restart grant has been factored into the draft financial plan that has been presented to you, and does factor in this software purchase. There's been a couple of comments about the change in the budget estimate. Of course, it's not uncommon, that once we go through an RFP process, we receive updated information, and that will refine our budget estimates. Part of the significance here is that when we initially budgeted, and this has been in the financial plan for the last couple of years, the property tax administration was not considered in the scope of the initial budget estimate. It was, however, considered when we went out to RFP, and as well, what we're proposing for the second year, the second phase, in terms of the public-facing web services, also we hadn't factored in initially. So those are two of the primary drivers for the change in the budget estimate there. And lastly, the incremental maintenance costs are factored into the draft financial plan. And as our IT manager, Mark, pointed out, we are seeing some savings as we retire existing software. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. You're darn good. Thank you, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I've got sort of three thoughts to throw out and listen to response. First, as a young engineer, when we did everything with slide rules, we always looked forward to computers because they were going to make everything more efficient and save money for everything. What I see is we're going to forgo $15,000 a year in software maintenance costs for $25,000 for software costs. And I'm not seeing anywhere in here where it says, and by gosh, we can put out property tax notices and we'll save 2 FTEs doing that or something. So I guess the question is, at the end of the day, does this cost us more money, which, could be it provides more service and we're prepared to pay more money, or is this making things more efficient and we will over time be saving money by needing less people to do the same amount of work? Second concern that I wouldn't mind some comments on is I think the engineering department is in the middle of a big major software purchase. I know we've got the record management software ongoing, and now we've got this one. And is that a little too ambitious to be, 3 major software upgrades in the city overlapping, if not all at once, overlapping? And then the other thing I think we should, as council, we should recognize this. Mr. Downton was quite clear that there's a lot of work, and it to some extent relies upon hiring the additional staff that's in the budget for this year that we haven't discussed and haven't decided, how council as a whole feels about that. We've all heard about what a tax increase is coming down the line, and we have different ideas on what to do about it. But if we're going to spend this much money on the software, we don't want it sitting on the shelf. We better hire the people to implement it. So that's really a caution for council, is whether, if we accept this tonight, we better bloody well accept the additional staff, or we're really dumb. So any comments there, Mr. Downton?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Through the chair, your first question around efficiency, this will save many hours a day, particularly in the development services side of the building, where I think staff currently can spend half a day hunting down information on a file that will be instantly available once this is in place. And coming from an organization that had this, and then seeing what staff are currently working with, I can see the savings. It's for me, it's kind of a no-brainer why you would do it. And for the public, it would just provide such better service too. If someone comes to the counter, we should be able to tell them what's happening with their property. And currently, I don't think we could do that on the spot. So I think the savings will be there. And it also, since City Hall has been closed to COVID, this is really the only route to delivering City Hall in a digital form. We need to build this foundation. And then once we can start offering some online web services, there'll be a lot of efficiencies there. And a good example there is with the building inspectors, when they can do an inspection on their phone and it's entered in the system in real time, there's no paperwork, there's no files that they're carrying with them. They do the inspection and they move on to the next one, and there's nothing to, at the end of the day, to come back to the office and do. So that just frees up hours of time and eliminates mistakes too. Your next point around engineering doing a big purchase, I'm not sure what you refer to. Is that the GIS project, perhaps, like just getting maps going? I think that's happening in the cloud with Esri right now, and it's something that we need to do as an organization to be in control of our own destiny around mapping and not rely on the CRD. So I don't think that's an organizational wide project that's consuming a lot of resources. It's unique to that one department. So I don't consider that a risk as far as this project goes. And then the last point around staffing is true. Like every project is successful or fails based on whether it was properly resourced and has the buy-in from the organization. So I think if we're going to go down this road, we need to acknowledge that it's going to take bodies and money and time, and hopefully the will is there of the organization to go forward with it.
So maybe just for clarity, if I could, I thought there was a suggestion for another half-time person in your department. Is that still the suggestion, or have I got that right? Or what will be required to be hired to get this implemented along the schedule you've talked about?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parkinson, and through the chair, through the service review, I believe the recommendation that came out of that was another body for IT, and mostly that's based on just the current volume of tickets that currently occur, and from my perspective, I think we're vulnerable having one person in that role right now, just from a lack of redundancy. If they should leave, a lot of knowledge leaves with them. And obviously that person's entitled to holidays and sick days. And so we're pretty thin when for example, this week is spring break. So it's myself this week. So to drive a big project along and deal with all the day-to-day break fix needs of the organization is a big ask. So I think we're quite far behind in terms of some of our big systems, and so we need to recognize that a bit of a push has to happen right now just to get these in place and play some catch up.
So the second person that's currently in the budget, is that going to be sufficient, or will you be looking for more help to get this over the finish line?
I think a second person would be sufficient. I think this project would be, I don't want to say a full-time job for myself, but it would certainly occupy a great chunk of my time for the next 18 months. So,
okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we do have a motion on the table, which is in the agenda that was moved. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Before we move on to 8.7, I've had a couple of councillors ask me if we could take a health break. So it is 7:56 right now. It's going to be very quick. I'm going to ask that everybody return by 8 p.m. So you have 4 minutes, and then we'll jump right back into 8.7.
We are rolling fairly quickly. Oh, okay, good.
Okay, it's 8 o'clock, so I'm going to ask the staff to drop the screen for me, please. Excellent. And it looks like we've got everybody back, except for Councillor Logan, but I'm sure he'll be back in a moment. So we're going to move on to 8.7. This is Ms. Clark, our planner, in regard to 594 Latoria Road side yard setback variance.
Good evening, Your Worship. Just let me share my screen here. There we go. Can you all see that?
No, so Ms. Clark, just so you know, what you're sharing with us right now is your Microsoft Remote Desktop, downloads, documents, AirDrop. It looks like you're sharing a different screen. Oh, now it just disappeared.
Say that again, sorry.
Oh, so we're not seeing anything right now. Ms. Clark, there you go. Now we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. All right. So before I get started, I just want to let you all know that Kaylee Wiseman, who is the developer's representative, is here with us today on Zoom. So this application before you is for 594 Latoria Road to consider a development agreement amendment and development variance permit application. So this recommendation in the staff report is as provided on the screen here. Moving forward, the property is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Latoria Road and Veterans Memorial Parkway. The property is largely treed, and an existing dwelling and driveway are located at the southern portion. The official community plan land use designation is neighborhood, hillside, and shoreline, as well as neighborhood center. There are no changes proposed to this OCP land use designation. The current zoning is a comprehensive development zone, CD20, which was adopted in 2011 to allow a mixed-use development up to 11 stories. At the time of rezoning, a development agreement was considered that included a site plan for building location on the property, as well as other requirements. So in late 2020, the applicant became aware of the city's capital infrastructure project to construct a dual lane roundabout at the intersection of Latoria Road and Veterans Memorial Parkway. Due to the environmental impacts as a result of this roundabout project, the subject property at 594 Latoria Road cannot be developed as intended due to the plans attached to the development agreement and to the zoning requirements. The city has also requested a 15-meter statutory right-of-way along the southern portion of the property for Latoria Creek. Therefore, this is a staff-driven application to facilitate the roundabout project and to enable development of 594 Latoria Road. Through amendments to the development agreement and through consideration of a development variance permit to specifically reduce the east side yard setback from 20 meters to 5 meters. So this is a preliminary roundabout and wetland plan. So this just to show you a little bit about this plan. We've got very faint gray is the property line of 594 Latoria Road along here. We also have the 15-meter proposed setback for the SRW, which is located in a dashed dark gray line along this southern edge. And this is for Latoria Creek. We also have a dashed purple line that goes north and south through the plan, and this is the setback from the proposed wetland works within the city's right-of-way. So this plan here shows the existing plans attached to the development agreement to the left of your screen, as well as the proposed site plan. This is still in draft form. However, it shows the building being relocated to the eastern portion of the lot. The building will be located 5 meters from the eastern property line. And further, the applicant has demonstrated that this dashed line that runs along the outside of the building here shows that the building will be located outside of the environmental setback requirements in the city's land use bylaw. So a public hearing is required because the changes depart from the original siting plan contained within the development agreement at the time of public hearing for the CD20 zone. So this slide includes the table of the development agreement amendments that you can find on page 4 and 5 of the staff report. Of note is item 1, which is the public amenity area. So the recommendation is to delete the plans relative to the public amenity area and remove the requirement for the minimum area required. And I will just go back to show you why this is. So as you can see on the left-hand existing site plan shown here, the area shown in yellow is the intended public amenity area. And you can see from the proposed preliminary roundabout plans, this actual amenity area is to be located within the city's right-of-way, in which the city will be using for the wetland enhancement project associated with the roundabouts. So going back, just to give you another look there, the development agreement also recommends removal of the siting plan as well. And as we've previously discussed, the removal of the plan will allow the building to be relocated towards the eastern portion of the plan of the site. Further amendments include to allow vehicles within an SRW located at the northern portion of the site, a deletion of requirements for gray water and green roof, and then an amendment to require current building codes as amended from time to time. So in terms of communication, a notification sign has been posted on the subject property as per council policy. At the date of this meeting, there has been no correspondence from the public. However, there is more notification to come. So prior to a public hearing, the city will provide notification as per the Local Government Act, and notification will be provided for a development variance permit application as well. You will notice that the staff report includes a section on next steps. So if council wishes to proceed with the staff recommendation for a public hearing, the next step is a public hearing. And then further to that will be a follow-up council meeting in which council considers the development agreement amendments and the development variance permit application. So that relative to option A and the staff recommendation. Option B is if council wishes to waive the public hearing, then notification requirements will still be met. However, no public hearing will be held. And this is option B for your consideration. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you.
So I have four hands up. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've read through this, and I'm going to leave most of the questioning to my engineering peers here, but I would like your opinion or staff's opinion. It seems that the public amenities area would be in a far more usable location. I've walked these areas near this wetland here, and I mean, it feels like the contribution, it's akin to when a developer leaves us, you know, a grassy slope that is too steep to use for anything and calls it a community amenity. I don't see a whole lot of viability down in these wetlands. They're seriously wet and swampy. And I mean, maybe you can discuss what the vision is for those lowlands, please, Carrie, and what we'd be losing in the original thinking on the public amenity on the east side of the property. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So thank you, Councillor Jansen, and through the chair. The original intent was to have a building that was connected to the public roadway. What was likely not aware of at the time is all the implications of the roundabout project and the use of the city's right-of-way land. So what we are considering as part of the amendment to the development agreement is still to ask the developer for trails, landscaping, and other wetland enhancements that would enable the project to blend into that right-of-way area and still realize that connection with the building form. Thank you.
Mr. Molnar, oh, sorry, Councillor Jansen. Mr. Molnar just has his hand up as well.
Yeah, let's hear.
Thank you very much. I'm just working to get my video online. I just want to bring everyone back a little bit because I appreciate the little discussion for the amenity area. So this amenity area that was originally posed as part of the development was the city's right-of-way. In 2019, 2019 or 2018, staff brought forward a consideration for council, which was to dispose of that aspect of the right-of-way that was contemplated in that development agreement. So the development agreement was originally written about that amenity area and the city's disposition of that amenity area to the developer. When council was asked to consider the disposition of that amenity area, I'm just trying to think of my words, council elected to not dispose of it for the reasons that we may have use of this area of right-of-way for our own needs. That is being shown to be the case by the wetland proposal that is integrated as part of the roundabout design, has come forward as part of the roundabout design, and is affecting this amenity area. So to go to Councillor Jensen's direct question, is this amenity area equal or of same intent? I believe that the intent of the original amenity area is considered with the zoning, or I propose that the intent of the original area for the zoning was about establishing an environmental setback and footprint that brought about the use and ecology of the system, which this is doing and improving. But however, for the city's use, which will be augmented by the developer as it couples and blends together with the intent. I hope that brings back and forward a little bit that use of the amenity area and why ultimately the disposition of it is off the table and why the development agreement fundamentally needs that change to be brought forward. However, the reason behind it now is supporting the environmental aspect for the roundabout. I'm here as well as Carrie to answer any further questions.
Thank you. And so am I hearing, are we satisfied with these wetland areas that we can see a usable forested walkway, perhaps with some frogs?
So thank you for that. And I'll answer it coupling with Carrie. So Carrie, just nod or let me know where you cut in. We've actually got 2 registered professional biologists working on this project. One for the city's intent, which is through WSP, and the other for the developer's intent, which is Aquatex, as well as the landscape architecture of Murdoch de Grief involved in it, which is bringing forward the layer of concept for the environmental consideration for the roundabout, coupling on it the layer of concept for the developer's intent. Will it be forested? It will be, respective of the trees, the aquatic environment, and the amphibians, as well as the fish. I think that on the edge of the wetland, we will certainly see some shade trees because that's important for that aquatic environment. And it'll be augmented against the road edge with pedestrian networks, multi-use trail, which is coupled with the roundabout, as well as some on-site works and services with the developer. So the development permit, the items that the developer will bring forward with this drawing aren't fully fleshed out yet, which is some of those amenities interactions that you're talking about from the building onto the public space. But we do have an intent to work together to realize that. So I think you'll see amenities with the roundabout project, which is that commuter way and the slip lane. You'll see improved planting for the aquatic, amphibian, and natural environment, as well as the treed aspect to bring about shade. But the developer is also proposing to bring some additional features that bring about aeration of the water systems and ecology of the system, as well as augment some of the tree environment as well. So you're going to see an interesting blend as we continue to work with the developer.
That sounds great. Thank you for the explanation, Brent and Carrie. And I'm basically finished, but trail connectivity, it's not just a trail to nowhere, it will connect with neighborhood trails, I'm assuming.
To the east and to the east, which is down Latoria, and to the north, which is up Veterans Memorial Parkway, nope, there will be a gap. I'd be not truthful if I told you that we're blending this to the east to tie in, but there is potential to tie in. And to the north, it's going to be part of the ultimate roadway design that we'll be asking council to consider with a scoping exercise similar to Machosen Road in the coming months. So there will be opportunity to connect it to Havenwood Park, and the gap is minor.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I had 5 hands up, but now I only have 2. So if you did mean to have your hand up, please put it up. Councillor Kobayashi, then Baxter, Day, then Parkinson. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to actually Mr. Molnar, another question. I'm just wondering, has 594 granted the SRW for the environmental reports for the roundabout now?
I'm very pleased with that question, Councillor Kobayashi. 594 has not signed the document at this time. However, they have been interactive with staff. We've been speaking with their solicitors. They have a final version of the document that they have offered comments on. And insofar, there's been no pushback. Their lawyer's feedback to us is that his direction is to work with the city to provide the statutory right-of-way. We do anticipate, though, that that will be tomorrow's question is sign the document and let's get it into land title so we can proceed with our applications, our respective applications, one for each project, ours, and then theirs, acting independently, speaking together. We need that document signed so we can proceed with that application. It's very, very, very important.
So we close or close?
Kaylee's on the call right now, and Kaylee's the one who's directing their lawyer. They have had our documents for several weeks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Baxter. Oh, Councillor Baxter, unmute.
We didn't mention mimes at the beach.
No, yes.
Ms. Clark, the environmental effects necessitate moving the building towards the east, but not towards the north. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Baxter, for that question through the chair. You are correct. There is a proposed SRW for pedestrian and cycling access on the north.
So, and yet it looks as if the extension of Brookfield Road now bends to the north. Why would that be?
So you're looking at the I'm actually going to defer this to Brent Molnar. I think he can answer that question better than I can.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Carrie, and through the chair to Councillor Baxter. Yeah, the building has shrunk a little bit in the north direction. As part of that siting exercise, they have given up to say several units would be an understatement in this environmental back and forth between each other. And you are correct. The intention is to have an east-west connector at the north of the site, and we had to try and work that around the built form context in such a manner that it would be able to connect to the east-west. But again, I don't want to say that we've worked through that centerline profile as it extends through those lands. That will be a factor of that realization. We're also working with the developer to try and convert that intent from a statutory right-of-way for public use into a road for public use, and the typical offset from that road for the built form.
The last time we discussed four-laning Latoria Road, there were still a lot of unknowns about what it would cost and what the chances of getting permission to move the creek would be. And the extension of Brookside Road was kind of a backup if the cost of moving the creek and doing all the restoration was excessive, or if we simply couldn't get permission to do that. Is that option still open to us? If development proceeds as shown on this plan?
Through the chair to Councillor Baxter, I think that the development of Brookside, or a road traveling east-west in between bisecting the lands as it goes from east to west, remains on the table, but council can always pull to take it off. When we're looking at the potential development of the Latoria properties, all the ones on that swath between Veterans Memorial Parkway and Wishart, staff have had to contemplate how many times do we want to cross this creek? And is it ecologically beneficial to maintain all those driveway crossings? So we are looking at that east-west connector as being an important bisecting connector to be able to offset the environmental factors of continual creek crossing. What we'd actually like to do is get those properties focused inward to a central roadway that provide ecological balance and balance against Latoria. So whether council elects to widen Latoria or not, the environmental goals of improvement along that area can still be realized as we go over the course of time. To answer further, we have received our drilling log information. We're waiting for the final report from Levelton in regards to that further piece of Latoria, especially down by Wishart. And we have engaged WSP and expecting a report in about Q2 of this year in regards to the environmental considerations. But one of the benefits of the duality of the team that's working on this particular aspect is that Aquatex, the environmental consultant, with their engaged party being Murdoch de Grief as the landscape architect, are actually bringing out some functional benefits to the rest of the system that then will layer our environmental as well as our geotechnical analysis on top of. I think by about Q2, Q3, everything goes well. We'll have a good information report to tell council what our obstacles are, what our likely success is, and then how we can step forward over the course of time to give council the opportunity to consider 2 lanes with a beautiful enhanced area or 4 lanes with a beautiful enhanced area. Long answer for your bisecting roadway question, but I hope that explains a little bit of the thinking behind it. It's the ecology of the system.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. One more question. A few years ago, in fact, when the rezoning of this property was carried out, there was a plan, at least a preliminary plan, that the additional wetland to offset the destruction by the roundabout would be provided as an addition to the wetland that is down at the edge of Royal Baylands, opposite the end of Wishart. Was this current plan found to be better than the other plan?
Thank you. And through the chair to Councillor Baxter, that is one of the balls that remain in the air. The ecological balance about offsetting the ponds that are on this property onto this system, we're looking at firstly. However, their environmental consultant has come back and talked about the potential necessity. I'm not at a point of position of information right now to be able to advise their biology consultant that we are into that plan. I don't know what the cost of that could be, what the degree of that could be, or what the ministry's consideration of it is. So I think that it's not out of the picture, but I've removed it from the picture insofar until we can build our needs for the rest of that system and bring that factor into bear at that time with a greater avenue. It might come to bear earlier than later.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm not sure who's best able to answer this question, but I'm looking at the table 1 summary of development agreement amendments. And number 3 on that list is the statutory right-of-way for access to 588 Latoria to Veterans Memorial Parkway. And the amendment that is proposed to include vehicles to facilitate the east-west roadway connection. So there is a natural path that exists from the corner of 579 Bunker to the boundary of this development. It's not really a part of this development. And the creek crossing would already be achieved at Bunker Road in that case. So I think it's important that there be a natural and functioning path for pedestrians as well as a pathway for cars to travel on. And I think that roadway is very close to the roundabout. Are there some limitations for how close in proximity you build another intersection to a roundabout?
Through the chair to Councillor Dave, absolutely. Intersection dynamics are a factor. This one has been looked at by the consulting team, which is comprised of 2 different consultants as well, Bunt Consulting as well as Watt. And they've looked at it as part of the organization for the roundabout. And this was found to be the best location shown and best location provided because it was opposite Castlewood and was appropriate distance to the north from that roundabout location. It would not be a signalized intersection and would likely be controlled in terms of east-west movement across Veterans Memorial Parkway. So the site will be designed to either feed people back to the roundabout or north to Veterans Memorial Parkway.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said. The site would be controlled?
That's right. So access in and throughout the lands would be able to allow people to come back to Latoria to use the roundabout to then go any direction that they wished, whether they wished to go west, east, north, or south into Olympic View. But those people that are exiting that north roadway would really only have the chance of coming right in or right out. At some point in the near future, that intersection would probably be not able to go east-west across Veterans Memorial Parkway because of the functionality of the roundabout allowing for that U-turn movement. There'd be almost no need to. But sorry, not meaning to pull us back, but you did also ask about the pedestrian connections. That is such a critical component, especially because of the environmental attributes of all the properties that are on Latoria. So Councillor Day and through the rest of council, we'd be looking to integrate as many potential pedestrian links because we view the environmental area to be a true ecological balance and benefit to the city of Colwood, as well as the surrounding lands. This should be something that's beautiful, that's used as a pedestrian road, and as well as potentially cycling enhancement area. And so we're pleased to be able to integrate that sort of thing in, but I do not wish council to think that we've gone forward and done a whole preliminary plan. It's the concept of tying in at Byzantin as a singular crossing, as well as an east-west that'll allow the consideration of the couplet or just a very simple east-west route. Sorry for using my hands, but I hope you can see it.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, but I've talked to the owners of the lands and they don't want to do that. So I think you've got the cart before the horse.
Absolutely. And no one on staff is promoting that those lands actually proceed out of turn. What we're doing is working with the concept plan, with the ideology that allows those developments to proceed with the plan intent in mind. And that's it. We've already had interest from about 3 or 4 of the 8 or 9 properties, and we're very pleased to be speaking to them about this potential and possibility. It'll all be subject to rezoning and council's consideration.
Thank you. My next question is for our planning department, Ms. Clark. And one of the issues when this was zoned in 2011 was the proximity to the older homes, hence the extra side yard setback on the eastern side, because that this 11-story building is now going to be overlooking at least 5 existing homes immediately to the east. And I'm just wondering why it's now been proposed to be removed almost entirely.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Day. I have identified this in the staff report, which is on page 8. So we have identified that there are some, in the official community plan through the design guidelines, there are requirements for buffering. So we have requested that the 5-meter side yard setback includes buffering. So this could be landscape fencing. I do respect that a 11-story building will have some amount of overlook. At this point, it's unclear what the developer's plans are relative to 11 stories.
So when I was reading the report, the drawing that outlines their latest idea shows parking all right up to basically the lot line. But you're saying that is not what you're anticipating?
I believe the parking will be as shown in the plan. However, there will be room for a buffer. So 5 meters leaves room for a significant tree buffer with landscaping as well as fencing. So there would be screening from the parking area to adjacent residential.
It also looks to me like, sorry, Councillor Day, that we have the proponent here as well with their hand up. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to respond. Kaylee?
Thank you very much, Mayor. To respond to Councillor Day's comment, the new revised site plan has actually reduced the height and the density significantly, as Brent, I believe, alluded to. So the new stories anticipated are approximately 8, with a reduction of approximately 50 units. So we have tried to address that concern with alignment with the neighboring properties in our revised site plan. Thank you.
And are any of the existing trees being retained?
We'll be working on that as we work through our landscape development plans and our environmental DPA work. So we'll work at retaining as much as we can, you know, exploring an arborist who we currently engaged and viability of those trees as well.
Thank you. And I'm curious because when Ms. Clark, when you put up your depiction of the intersection, it showed the wetlands on the south side of the intersection, whereas previously they had been adjacent to the new building. Is that a change?
Through the chair, Councillor Day, it is not a change. So the south portion is for Latoria Creek, and there is a 15-meter setback for that creek relative to our land use bylaw, which is the same as a wetland.
So what happens to the stormwater retention pond at the corner?
I'm going to defer to Brent Molnar about the stormwater detention pond. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carrie, and through the chair to Councillor Day. Councillor Day, are you referring to the stormwater retention pond on the existing property or within the city's boulevard?
Within the city's boulevard.
Thank you very much. That pond is exactly what Carrie showed. So that pond has been studied, as I indicated, through the 2 biological teams, being Aquatex and WSP, and that biological wetland is being amended and stretched to the north and to the east, and will be subject to review of both the federal departments of fisheries and land and oceans FLNROD, as whatever all that stands for, and the Ministry of Environment. So that is what that statutory right of way that Councillor Kobayashi was asking for signifies, is once we get that statutory right of way and have access to apply for relative to the lands. And it's looked at that wetland, as I previously indicated, consider the amphibians, the aquatic habitat, as well as all the environmental benefits and plant species that are necessary to sustain those environmental habitats at a near 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 planting ratio from what you see today. What you see today is confirmed to be largely natural growth that grows promptly.
So I'm just curious, perhaps I misunderstood. I thought Ms. Clark said that the creek was on the south side of Latoria Road. Currently, it's located on the north side of Latoria Road.
So through the chair, Latoria Creek, as it passes here, passes underneath Veterans Memorial Parkway at present, and starts on the west side of Veterans Memorial Parkway on the north side of Latoria, passes under Veterans Memorial Parkway, and continues on the north side where it's joined by another tributary, perhaps formerly known as Latoria Creek, and then continues on the north side of Latoria to run up until it hits Wishart, where it travels underneath Latoria and then goes into Latoria Creek Park. So it travels its southward journey to the ocean at that point. But there is another wetland that's contained in Olympic View lands that contributes to the creek system as well on the east side of the intersect of Veterans Memorial Parkway. It's very, very complicated. Well, it's not really, but there's quite a few ponds. So the pond that's in Olympic View system is a component of the Olympic View system, of which the Olympic View developer is butting up against, but not touching with the present phase of activity. And what Ms. Clark has identified with the activity with 594 is relevant to the roundabout, that development's proposal and ecological system of Latoria Creek relative to the intersection. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. That's good for me.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think this should go forward to the public hearing. I think that would be useful. I think, you know, obviously it's coming forward now as a staff initiative, but I think at the public hearing, it would have to be a joint initiative. There's some issues on both sides of the fence here. And I would like sort of clarity. I must admit, I found it hard to follow some of the drawings in that. And it's hard because you're probably working full-size drawings and issuing 8.5 by 11s to us, which make it a little hard to follow. So I guess some of the questions that I would hope would get answered at a public hearing are what was the wetland and the setback required initially? I mean, these, you know, a lot of these ponds aren't new and the 15-meter setback isn't new. So there was obviously a requirement for some kind of setback that would come with the initial plan. And, you know, how much is that being altered by the roundabout? So that's one thing, I guess, and probably, I guess this would be up to the developer to talk about the request to change the some of the requirements that came as a condition of zoning, the gray water, the green roofs, the public amenities and that. And, you know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong there, but if that's what we're there, we should discuss those at a public hearing. And then this is sort of following up a little bit perhaps on what Councillor Day was talking about. So we know at the southern end of the property, we have these wetlands and we're sort of forcing the project to the north if we like. But we're looking at a reduction on the stat right-of-way on the east property line. And I think, yeah, a very large building at 5 meters off a property line, I think is going to be imposing. So might look to see if it's necessary to relax that setback from 20 meters to 5 meters all the way up the east property line, or perhaps it starts there and it gets expanded a little bit more when you get further north. I don't understand the project well enough to know if that's viable or not. But if the impact from the wetlands is at the south end, you wonder if there's a necessity to adjust the setback on the north end. And then I just would like to make sure that the drawings as they come forward reflect the ultimate conditions on Latoria and Veterans, so we can really see not just what's proposed as part of this roundabout, which of course there's drawings for and everything, but we know that the plan is to 4 and 5 lanes, those roads, especially the intersections. So we need to make sure that we understand the final configuration of all the works there with this building. So as I said, I don't really think there's all that much major here. I think that this should go to a public hearing and see what the public has to say. But there are some issues that with some clarity would be helpful for at least me. So thank you, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to look to, I'll look for that information hopefully for you, Councillor Parkinson, as you said, as it comes to public hearing. So I'm going to need to look for a motion from council, please. Councillor Parkinson.
I'd be prepared to move option A, that the amendments to the development agreement be prepared and a public hearing be scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Logan, are you seconding that? Or are you looking?
No, I'll second it, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to clear your hands. Do either one of you wish to, Councillor Parkinson, do you wish to make any further comments?
I think you probably heard enough from me, haven't you, Mayor?
Never. Councillor Logan, I have had enough of listening to Logan though. So, anyone else? Just giving you an opportunity. Nope, I don't see it. So I will call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 8.8. Oh, excuse me.
Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Day.
I am opposed.
Councillor
And I
Day
give
opposed.
my-
Yeah, you were just a little slow for, or I need to slow down myself. 8.8. This is Mr. Molnar, Director of Engineering and Development Services, regarding bylaw number 1836, the development cost charges. Mr. Molnar.
Thank you very much. I'd like to share my screen if I may, and you never know how this is going to work, so we'll see how it goes. I think it'll go well. Okay, I'm hoping that you can all see a white sheet that says City of Colwood Development Cost Charge Bylaw. Thank you, Gordy. I see you nodding. Thank you. So I am excited to be bringing forward an update. Frankly, page 1 should say 2021 because we're now in there. But I'm more than pleased to have been working with the development community, as well as our consultant, which is Rachel Sansom, on bringing this program forward. There are some initial changes and upgrades that I need to do to the PowerPoint that I plan to do live, but I also expect that there may be some questions around it, so I'm here and able to answer those questions as we go. Maybe I can get the screen to move. There we go. So our introduction is that we worked first with our consultant and then with our traffic studies and information that we'd received through the development of lands and the considerations that are being brought forward over the last period of time to bring them forward and identify projects that were necessary, that supported growth. And so we then went and prepared cost estimates for those projects that were necessary to support the growth. And then we worked to look at the benefit that those projects brought to our existing community and the growth of the City of Colwood. And the resultant factor is DCCs calculated per category. With our project identification, we looked at the roads and the intersections that would be necessary to accommodate the growth. And again, as we based it on our transportation master plan, how that was then considered through joint memos and traffic studies, the official community plan, as well as recent development proposals. Once our project list was there, we started looking for the project infrastructure costing, which included the infrastructure, physical works, earthworks and environmental, property acquisition, especially along Latoria if there was any, cycling and pedestrian facilities, which we know to be a high importance, safety, the soft costs such as engineering and fees, as well as we brought a contingency factor to bear as well inside the program, which is calculated at 30%. A factor of the program is also to consider the benefit to our existing population, as well as those people that are there from development. So that's the new and existing user consideration, and it's called the benefit to existing users. So this allocates the percent that existing people are using the roadways versus the developers or the development intent to add traffic and volume to it. This percent benefit to existing users can be difficult to quantify. So there's usually an element of attributable to new development that's associated with every project and that we bear in the existing community's use for. But it is a thumbnail approach for what our present use and its anticipated growth caused by specifically development is. And so that's how that factor plays in directly. In regards to the unit rate calculation, the costs are divided by the total trip ends. And we use the peak, sorry for the spelling mistake there, it says PAC PM, but peak PM hour as a result in the unit cost to consider how many people are likely to be using the roadway, to look at the growth factor. And then in each category of development, trip ends are assigned per the Institute of Traffic Engineers standard, which is the ITE standard, to determine the fee per category. Ultimately, DCCs are calculated by the cost of new infrastructure that's necessary to service growth divided by those number of units that are causing that infrastructure need. Simple division formula. In terms of the DCC, the timeline and horizon proposed has been consistent from when we first looked at this with Finance and Governance and Committee of the Whole. Essentially, we're looking at a 20-year growth rate. But here I need to draw your attention to a couple of changes. The slide says growth rate of 2%. And frankly, the growth rate has changed a little bit as we've worked through the program, and we have increased the density potential per year. So that growth factor is also increased per year. Based on the development actualization of the last several years, we moved from about 100-ish units a year to a potential of up to 400 units per year. That brought a growth rate which is averaging over the lifetime of the project to 2.84%, but does peak in year one at 2.76% and decline on an annual basis all the way to the nth growth rate at the 20th year horizon. So it averages out at about 2.84%, but our population has increased up from that number that is 2,600. I'm just looking for my notes, which are scattered all around the table, to about 34,000, not 26,000 to 34,000 from the increase in development in the South Colwood is considered. The new residential units factored is 8,620, with the new commercial institutional about 1,200 or 1,220,000 square meters, which has been actualized based on the growth intent of the Allendale lands, as well as the anticipated growth known through the Southlands, with industrial also considered in terms of the Allendale at approximately 5.3 hectares. So these are the values that are formed that growth rate and projected population density and the new units. So eventually are forming a factor of that math equation, which is the growth divided by the amount of units. So in our project selection roads, we first off looked at the transportation master plan and those roads that were identified through all the studies and considerations for where we're getting a large part of our growth, which is significantly South Colwood.
Excuse me, Brent, would you like to finish your presentation or would you like to answer questions along the way?
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. I should have addressed that. I would love to finish it because we've got Rachel Sansom on the call as well, and there may be opportunities where Rachel, which is our consultant on the project, should best answer. And I can feel free to back up or go forward with any slide now I figured out how to work it well. So these are the project list of roads, and they've remained largely consistent since we first considered it through the finance and governance as well as committees as a whole. And through our development and community consultation, we didn't see any significant change to this. We did see modification of the areas. An example of Machosen Road south of Latoria intersection is not in the DCC program. The DCC program considers the intersection and works northward because that's where the density of development contributes growth factor to the existing users. So we looked at all these different roads, factored into it as raised through the different studies and the transportation master plan, as well as included in the program updates to the transportation master plan on a cyclical basis, as well as program updates to the development cost charge program embedded in the program as program costs. So that list that was just presented in front of you is shown visually on this map here. You can see it's a significant number of, I'm going to say primarily the collector and arterial roads that are identified in the city of Colwood. That's because everything that comes out from South Colwood is actualized onto Souk Road or Veterans Memorial Parkway. Why isn't Veterans Memorial Parkway put in? Because a section north of the Souk intersection is not under the city's control. It's the Ministry of Transportation and Highways. But there's our road list actualized in a map, which forms part of the bylaw. And these are the cross sections that we considered. Even though council is doing a ratification exercise or a validation exercise of portions of the transportation master plan, it was necessary to base the program on the known factors of today. And so the transportation master plan was brought into bear Then as we validated through Wishart Road, for example, that was considered as well as up-to-date present costs through a recent analysis with WSP in December, January of this year. So the following slides are a series of the cross-sections as they're applied for those segments of roads that you saw on that previous map. So as we go through it, there's Goldstream Ave as considered in the Transportation Master Plan presently. And for that segment of Goldstream Ave where we expect it to be applied, there's Kelly Road, and we know that council has reprioritized this higher through the active transportation. So we expect to be validating this cross-section with council later on this year. We've got those portions of Souk Road, which are under the city's control, all the sections all the way down, which should take into account those necessary improvements to realize the bike and pedestrian, which are largely predominantly how we add to the laning and geometrics. This does not take into account some of the BC Transit initiatives that are coming forward as of lately, because BC Transit is funding those predominantly themselves. But the complement to those programs, which is the pedestrian facilities and the cycling facilities, are contained in the program, as well as the intersection upgrades, such as at Machosen and Souk Road, for an example. Sorry, that's going backwards. There is the cross-section for Souk Road as considered right now, as we've seen validated with Urban Systems through their initial review of Souk Road in earlier 2020 or 2019. I can get that date if it's necessary. Souk Road is as well as it goes from Veterans to Jacqueline. And we're working with the ministry right now to augment the section, which has come out through a recent referral, and we'll update council as to a potential consideration for the traffic master plan as we continue to unveil those cross sections of the list after we get through the prioritized list of the active transportation plan as recently tabled by council. The Chosen Road does consider some intersection and upgrades. So specifically it focuses at Latoria, but also brings into account all those intersections that were recently reviewed with Urban Systems, the major or signalization of those intersections as opposed to the minor and the left turn movements as compromised, and also looks at Machosen Road from Latoria at the intersection there. Chosen Road as validated as part of the TMP considerations, and we're using that to be able to go and proceed with that tender work as we speak, essentially. Veterans Memorial Parkway, you'll note that first section there, which is Souk Road North, is ultimately owned and controlled by the Ministry of Transportation and Highways. And that south segment is part of, again, that exercise that we'll be working through to validate the Transportation Master Plan with Urban Systems later on this year. And that's the cross section that's presently in the Transportation Master Plan for Veterans Memorial Parkway, which the program is based upon. Allendale, you're seeing an actualized plan. They're talking about the uses that we know at present, as well as this is bringing forth the consideration that was considered by council in the scoping exercise in 2020 for Allendale Road. That is part of the RFP that's presently or about to be let for the construction services for that component of works. Victoria Road, this is the section ultimately from Chosen Road all the way through to Veterans Memorial Parkway, and there are sections of land specifically for those areas from between Veterans Memorial Parkway and Wishart where it comes to bear. The potential for the couplet and the Brookside extension, which we heard spoken about in our previous discussion about 594 Latoria, that I think will be ratified as we continue to go and work with council to identify the known obstacles for the creek, bisecting roadway, and ultimately ask council to consider the laning and geometrics. I should advise that through the application of 594, as well as the validation exercise, staff are desirous of working with council to table that appropriately with the information known at hand. And with 594, we're not looking to validate the 4 lanes because it's being realized through the roundabout concept, which is just the intersection performance. So we'll talk about that when we get to public hearing for that project. Wishart Road, this is going to be one of those sections that we review with Urban Systems with council. It should be scheduled up within the next couple months, and we recently just had to pull back from our present movement on it because it just needs a little bit more work before we go into workshop environment with council. But Wishart Road is considered in the Transportation Master Plan presently, and this is what the cross-section is based upon, which is the image down at the bottom end of your screen. Lagoon, is considered in the transportation master plan presently. We know that the active transportation plan has brought about some prioritization, as well as the consideration of council in regards to their sidewalk priorities, as well as the active transportation reorganizing of priorities. And so we'll be pleased to work with council to validate this cross-section as well as we work to activate those active transportation network priorities, working with community planning and council collectively. So the intersections that are brought into the program, because it's not just the intersections, and specifically those portions that are, sorry, not just the roadways, and predominantly those pieces of the roadways that are handling the growth and capacity. So the addition of bike lanes, the addition of sidewalks, but also those intersections that are known to need upgrades as identified through the different studies that we've received from either Urban Systems, Bunt, or Watt, are 3 traffic consultants that are working with the city on compiling and keeping council up to date. This is a map that was vetted by council in 2019, then again in 2020 with the rezoning considerations, and it's consistent to the map that you're seeing today. But these are the intersections that are being applied with the development cost charge program. So in terms of the cost summary, and this is where we start to go into the math, the cost of these roads, and we can go into whatever detail the council wishes. You may see my eyes going to different screens as I've got multiple open, but the cost estimates that were first initiated through review exercises with a consultant, and then worked through as part of the validation exercises that we have established insofar with council, based on the transportation master plan that was considered for the laning and geometrics, and then put forward with the prioritization of our official community plan. This came out with the list. And then what we did with our cost is we validated that with the team, with the consultant, reviewed those with our stakeholder group. And then we went out in December and January of this year when we started receiving cost estimates that were higher than anticipated, especially for the Allendale Works and Services, which council is aware of. And we asked WSP to review our unit rates and our cost considerations and validated all of the exercises. And that has brought about a subtle change to the numbers if you're comparing what was first viewed at finance and governance to what you're looking at today. So this is the roadworks as considered for Veterans Memorial Parkway, and the list of all that list as considered for priorities and cash flow. Comes out to a roadwork subtotal of approximately $45 million worth of works over the course of 20 years. In regards to intersection, there is, and I'm sorry, but my screen is a little bit blocking it. There's a total down there at the bottom, and the intersection are summed out to be, I don't have a summary on there, but roughly $11 million excluding the tax expense, which is added to create the total. So it's greater than $11 million worth of capital cost for those roadworks. And it brought about the fact that, and included in the DCC program is studies and materials necessary to keep the DCC program updated. Council has heard me speak about the necessity of upgrade, the fact that we've existed with the DCC program for a number of years. This proposes that we upgrade the DCC program on a 3 to 5 year basis. And as we are incorporating traffic studies into the development agreements for the southern lands, we anticipate those traffic studies coming in as requested and every 3 years at minimum. So the intention is to bring forward an update to the DCC program, which keeps the costs and growth factors live with what's being actualized and then estimated to carry forward based upon known actualized growth as reviewed between 3 and 5 year cycles. So the DCC program right now includes transportation studies that may be necessary to support it, updates for consulting time to bring about an administrative subtotal that's relevant to the DCC program and include in the DCC program, results in a DCC calculation with net DCCs at just over $46 million worth of works. A key factor of that DCC calculation component is the DCC recoverable over the course of the program and the amount in reserves, which is current as of December 31st, 2021, or 2020, sorry, as well as the tax contribution per year of 1.107, which is contained in their financial consideration, which council is seeing as part of the budget considerations. This is the biggest factor that all of this boils down to. What are going to be the costs to the developer? And I would like to bring attention to our focus group that was first off a series of meetings that started out with a large focus group and then worked down. And obviously, everyone always gets to, well, what's the cost per developer? I'm pleased at the developers speaking forward to today and providing you a note from Seacliff, as well as spoken from Jim Hartshorn. And I've received feedback from Gablecraft that says that they are supportive of the rates that we have here. But it is an increase over what's present. Right now, our rates are just sitting at about $4,000 or just under $4,000 for a single family with suite. And that's a single family in a zone that's enabled to a suite, whether you have a single family with suite or a single family without a suite as actualized. That's the cost is proposed to increase from that $3,929 up to $5,759. So it is an increase, and it's an increase across the board. And we did see about a 6% increase to these costs due to our cost review with WSP in December and January, which was again pushed out to that stakeholder group, identified as this is higher cost than what you've seen our last presentation, so that they're aware. So we feel that the presentation, the program insofar has incorporated changes as per council direction. We've held over 6 direct engagements with our stakeholder groups, so the development community. We feel that that has been done. And we're thankful for their involvement. They've invested substantial time with staff and our consultant to be able to bring this to bear with open dialogue. We've got policy documents and statutory declarations that are ready for implementation with council's consideration with forward reading with the bylaw. And this report is requesting council consideration through consideration later on tonight to provide first and second reading to the bylaw. If council does see fit to grant first and second reading to the bylaw, our next step is to proceed to the ministry. The ministry has already viewed and vetted and provided comments with our draft bylaw, but the whole workings are what next has to go to them, where they go through all the math and see the logic and reason, and then give their consideration before council can proceed to any public hearing or consideration of third and fourth. So I want to thank you for your attention. I am more than willing to go back and show any slide that council wishes, but for the expediency of council review and discussion, I will end screen share. If that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through the mayor to Brent, I'm just a lot of questions here in my own head here. So my first question actually is the units of growth. Can you explain to us where that number 8,000 some odd came from? Now, that's I would imagine that's Royal Beach, Royal Bay, Olympic View, the potential Emoji project, right? And where else? I mean, like, where's that number coming from?
So thank you very much, Councillor Kobayashi, and through the chair, everywhere in the official community plan that proposes land use that allows for densification, we've tried to consider in there. It doesn't mean we've gone into all the R1 land areas, so the single family, and started thinking those will all be 2. But where the growth is considered as a growth area, such as in the Allendale district, Colwood Corners, for example, growth that's known along the Goldstream Avenue area from 468, as well as growth as potential through the official community plan along the Latoria corridor. And you were very correct in listing Olympic View, Moji's development as known growth areas, but we also had to assume potential growth along the Latoria corridor. The Latoria corridor, for example, in the official community plan allows up to 6 stories with environmental consideration. So those factors have been put in there as a factor. And we've had to assume a growth number. Those have been assumed independently along that area is about 1,000 units. And that's exactly why we feel that the program needs to come forward on repetitive cycles. We are proposing a growth based on the density of actualized in the last several years. We may see a downsurge, we may see an upsurge. We've got Royal Beach coming online. We haven't seen them actualize growth yet. And so that's why we feel that the program needs to be refreshed. And it should be looked at as a factor that needs to be brought forward and considered in terms of actual as well as projected. That's why I spoke to the growth ranging from 3.8% in year 1 and declining. So it averages about 2.85% per year, which is higher than the growth is considered in recent factors such as the community plan or other considerations. I'm looking for my notes.
So who actually came up with that number? Did we use a subject matter expert to come in and do that estimate then? Because it's an important number, because If we get that really wrong, I mean, it could be a substantial tax lift here. So, I guess who does that? Who's that expert that, or do we have someone that actually looks over our shoulder and say, yeah, you guys did it right? I mean,
Great question, Councillor Kobayashi. So first off, we used the demographic study and land analysis that was prepared and that was reviewed by Council earlier in 2019 or 2020, which predicted a 35% population increase by 2028, and then an additional 16% population increase by 2038. Both those factors were brought into the zoning considerations that Council's considered insofar. Those are exactly the numbers that you considered, as well as the growth that was known in Allendale. Once we took that growth projected by the demographic study and the known density considerations of the developing lands through zone considerations, we had to do our best analysis as considered and enabled by the official community plan. So it's with the rule of thumb, it's with a lens, and I think you're bang on. We're not going to see it perfect, and that's why it's necessary to update and keep refreshed the DCC program. But I think a key point of your question is what happens if the growth isn't there? Yeah. If the growth isn't there, well, then we only need these roads and systems and works because of the growth. So if the growth isn't there, then what happens is essentially the program slows down. And then as that growth is reviewed every 3 years, which is well more frequent than the 20 odd years that we've gone so far, right? As that is reviewed every 3 years, we can say that number was right, that number was off. I don't want council to build an expectation of it being perfect. I think it's important that council build an expectation that this is an accurate snapshot of today based on the growth that we've seen in the last several years as reflected back on that demographic study and land analysis as considered by Colliers. And so, however, we do think we need to upgrade it every 3 years to 5 years.
So was there a sanity check, Brent, to see, if our charges are sort of in line with something comparable in another municipality? Is the $5,900 about right, or is it way too low? Is it way too high? I guess it's those other benchmarks that you check yourself against.
You are bang on. So we did do a comparative analysis of our immediate neighbors in terms of where our DCC program sits. It sits roughly and similar to Langford. It's not that far off. It's a little bit lower or higher in some sort of thresholds. But it is a program goal relative to Metchosin. It's 100% increase over Metchosin. Metchosin doesn't have any. Relevant to Esquimalt doesn't have any. Relevant to View Royal, they also have minimal. So we're really looking against those neighbors that have DCC programs, being those neighbors that are facilitating growth, which happens to be predominantly in the West Shore. So Langford is our closest comparative, of which we're respective of. Okay. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. So, and so my last question, I don't know how long it takes or what the expense is, but would you recommend, would it not be a prudent move on our part because of the financial impact of this? I mean, it could be substantial, right? And I don't know, I mean, there's probably a plus or minus. I could see where some errors could be potentially, and there's a lot of variables in this. I do see that and I understand that. But do you think it's a prudent move on our part for us to go, okay, we've done this, we work with the developers, they seem to be happy with this, but to have that a third party independent guy come in and just check us over right now and take a look at us. Is this sensible? Is this an expert? I mean, someone that's done this years and years and years. I'm not talking about, someone that's associated, but a totally independent person just to come in and say, yeah, this is really good, or warning, here are your risks. So you can manage it. So it helps you manage it as well as make us understand the risks. So it's just a question I'm asking.
Frankly, I think it's a great question. And that's why we've been so open to not undertake this ourselves. We hired a consultant that has experience with DCC programs as our lead in this. And that's where we went out and we actually reached out to all the developers for their active projects. So before we went out for third-party review, independent review through engaged consultant of the costs that were brought forward, as I indicated in December, January of just in the last couple of months for active review, we reached out to everyone that was tendering projects to, again, please share with us that information so we can make sure our program is the most respective. And additionally, we've got the beauty of the highest independence possible, which is the ministry reviewing this document in terms of the math. They are charged with ensuring that the program is not only equitable, but not balanced. They're not the ones that look at, is this road applicable to be included in the program? They're looking at the cost and the factors in consideration as being borne by a municipal entity. And so I hope that you feel that that's a respective third-party lens on top of the several parties that have been engaged in so far.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian.
Councillor Baxter.
Brent, I just want to say well done and thank you. As you pointed out a few times, a long overdue project, really complicated, very difficult to stick a pin in a moving object like this one. And it's never been moving faster in Colwood than now. But you've done a great job. Thank you very much.
To Rachel.
Yeah, to all of you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Ditto on the good report. I know that this very difficult job, because if it was easy, we would have done it 10 years ago at least. So thank you very much. I'm curious, when I looked at how we were doing this, I was concerned because we're reviewing our transportation master plan and whether or not which one should go first. And so I'm wondering, in bringing this forward, is it possible we could lose money if we've gotten it wrong? So is there a liability that's incurred by charging those DCCs and outlining what roadways they're for and then maybe not realizing that in the future?
Wow. Through the chair to Councillor Day. A program is as good as the math of the day it's created. Some of you have heard me speak about the escalation in the construction industry that has been significant as of late. A month ago, we were advised that resin, which is necessary to make up the plastic pipes, has increased 20% inside of 30 days. Those sort of factors can never be accounted for. So it is a snapshot in time, and you're very correct. It's a snapshot in time relevant to a transportation master plan that council is vetting and council is amending. That's why the beauty of this program isn't for the lanes that exist, they're for the works that don't. The bike lanes, the sidewalk, the additional lanes that may be necessary to accommodate the traffic. And I think that there's a greater risk in sticking with a program that doesn't balance those costs. Every day that we go forward and actualize a density unit that pays DCCs, this program has outlined that relevant to the costs today, which are frankly yesterday, because it was physically yesterday that the report was written, that we are leaving on the table $2,000 of available costs available to the city to be able to actualize some of its OCP-driven goals that are coming forward in terms of necessity because of the pressures caused by development on these roads and infrastructures. It's important to reflect on the fact, or from my perspective, it's important to reflect on the fact from multitude of questions that it is a snapshot in time. And that's why it does need to be updated. But if we don't take that step to upgrade it and respect that snapshot as being accurate to the snapshot, we're leaving $2,000 we found on the table per door.
Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson.
So speaking to my council colleagues here, this is probably one of the biggest decisions we're going to make here. I mean, we're talking of a $22 million from tax dollars towards these roads here. Yes, the DCC projects will kick in, but there are assist factors and an existing development that has to pay its share too. That's $22 million. The other thing we're talking about here is a population of 34,000, 36,000 people based on that number of units. Well, you know, I mean, God bless developers. Nobody would be a developer if they weren't incredibly optimistic. So you sit in a room of developers and say, how many units are going to get developed over the next 20 years? It's a pretty significant number. But our OCP was written for 20 years and it goes, we think our OCP numbers, I think it was 26 or 28,000. So what are we doing? Brent, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in your math slide, your quick math slide, where you said it's essentially the cost of the works divided by the number of units, there's a time factor on that, isn't it? A number of units in 20 years. I think we know that some of these projects aren't pushed out to the end. I think we've seen, I think we built the double lane roundabout because it had to be built to within 5% of the growth. And then we had veterans needed to be done at 30% and Latoria at 50. There were things that had to be done. You can't just wait till you get the last DCC in to build these projects. So you have to be a little bit careful. Brent has got well-deserved plaudits, and he was kind enough to include Rachel in these as well, and I'm sure she's worked very hard as well. And they talk about several meetings with the developers over several months. We better be careful that we're not jumping into this too quickly without understanding it. I think Brent was incredibly thorough on here's the roads we've talked about. And I think we could probably draw those maps in our sleep now. We've seen those maps so many times about the different roads and the intersections. So we know the roads he's talking about. They've done their best to get the numbers as right as anybody can make them on the estimates. But the key factors here are, how many units do we think are going to be built in 20 years? I mean, I started work at Royal Bay at 1993, I think. And if you'd asked me how many units are going to be built in 20 years, I'd say, well, it'd be done, and then, so what are there? There's a number. So the growth rate that was 1% and is maybe now 2%, and then now we're estimating it's 3 or 4 or something. All of us from Victoria have seen many booms and busts and pick up and slow down. And so what is a realistic growth rate? What should we be projecting? And just thinking about this today, I kind of go, well, how do we get to 34,000 people? Is that the right number for the city? Have we ever sat down and said, 34,000 is the right number? Our OCP said 28,000. Now are we going to, in a stroke of a pen, say, let's go 34,000? How do we discuss these things and come to the right answer? And I don't know, but you could see how ideally we'd say, here's how we're getting to 26, like the OCP says, in 20 years. And in 10 years, we'll start figuring out how we get to 35 if that's what we want to do. There are some huge decisions here to be made, and none of us know. None of us know, is the 8,600 new units in 20 years the right number? I mean, based on this year and last, it seems like a pretty good number. Based on 5 years before that, maybe not. So again, if it's not, what does that mean? If it's, for instance, because that's exactly how you get this. You divide by 8,620. And if none of us like that number, or if we think there's a better number, we should be talking about that. I don't have the answers, but this is huge stuff we're talking about. And I'm reluctant to vote on, $22 million and 36,000 people without more time to think about it and rationalize it. And I know if a subdivision comes in tomorrow, there'll be a little bit less DCC money, but if we do something for today and it's going to last 4 or 5 years, we should be pretty comfortable with it. And I'm concerned. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'll wait to hear.
Councillor Baxter.
I specifically want to address what Councillor Parkinson said. And this is from 30 years of doing this type of work. We're not deciding how many people are going to live in Colwood in the future. We're not allowed to decide that in this format. That's done through the OCP and through zoning. You're making the best guess you can to set the rate. And as Brent has said, we'll re-examine that about every 3 years or so, and that's where it'll get changed. When we see whether the numbers are turning out the way we expected or not. But we don't make the decision here how many people are coming to this community, how many units are going to be built. We make the decision to collect a certain amount of money based on the assumptions that are in other documents elsewhere, as well as to some extent in this one. And then you change it as you go along. And had we made, if we've got it slightly wrong or drastically wrong, 3 years from now, we'll get a chance to correct course. Another 3 years to correct course again. It's a bit like firing a rocket at the moon. You're not going to get it right first fire, so you have little adjusting fires of your rocket engines so that you hit the target correctly. But if we don't pass this, we're not collecting the money that we're going to need to build these roads. And the people are going to come, as many as they're going to come, are going to come anyway. And I don't want us to not have the money to build the roads that they're going to need. So we need to pass this. And if you want to rethink it at leisure whilst collecting the right amount of money. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. That was pretty good wisdom there, Councillor Baxter. You're making me rethink right now. You're probably right on that. I guess I was just taking the common sense approach right now, and I looked at our track record on how many units of homes that we put up every year. So basically, what this number was telling me, that's my first common sense question, was because, it's like any engineer, right? The devil's in the denominator. And in this case, it's a high number. And hence, the rates were lower. So, and I'd understand. I mean, if I was a developer, I would be trying to drive up that number as high as I could. But here's the bottom line. I believe that the detailed work has been done on the numerator side of it. It's just that what concerns me is that I just look at our track record and so over the next 20 years, what you're telling me, over 400 houses have to be built a year, or 400 units a year. I mean, our track record doesn't show that at all. And it's not going to hit. Oh, sorry, Brent, go ahead. But I don't know. It just seems far-fetched to me. That was the only reason I brought it up. But what you said does make sense. And what Brent said about, we can amend this 2 or 3 years down the road. I understand that now. And I guess I'm looking at this more favorably now. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you very much, Mayor Martin. Just to address Councillor Kobayashi, and not to add or minus. So our density uptake for the last 3 years, and you're very right. If we went back 5 years ago, before that, or projected forward, who knows? But for the last 3 years, has been about 450 units per year. We're taking that number at about 400, but I think that we all feel that we're going to slimline on certain times with COVID. So just giving you a little bit of balance there. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. In the course of this discussion, I'm concerned, Mr. Molnar, that this DCC bylaw seems to have been developed with your expertise and consultants' expertise, but also a lot of input from the developers themselves. And I'm concerned that it's not in alignment with our official community plans. So how do we reconcile that? Can you just take our OCP and throw it out the window? It's not going to apply for the DCCs?
An excellent question. And through the chair, the developers did not contribute to the density factors. Those were taken straight from the zone. and they were taken straight from the OCP. Where the developers contributed was, quite frankly, looking at the end numbers. And no, there's no developer that came forward and said, you need to make that $1,000 higher, Brent, because they have to pay it. And it's a factor of their built form costs. What they ended up doing is looking at that end number and discussing if it was palatable or not, and then going back and looking at the road list and saying, well, is there any change? And as the road list is supported by the known document of the Transportation Master Plan, even if it amends, there was almost no debate for what could be changed or not. So it became then the duration of the program, what came first and second in regards to the works, and then was that cost palatable? And staff had to work through with them where those costs came from, equally as well as we're talking about tonight. And so their acceptance of those costs wasn't to drive it faster or higher or provide the city with the density number, but to confirm, yeah, that's what we're planning on building there. And then staff took those numbers and worked with their consultant to implement the program. And then our next meeting with the developers came back with those results. So they weren't driving those factors of the math.
But you're using population that is not in our OCP.
What we're using is the growth is actualized through a building permit process. And then what we did is we took that growth factor over the last 3 years. Those are the numbers that I mentioned to Councillor Kobayashi. And we applied that over the course of time. Yes, we did assume a static linear growth pattern. And that's why we feel it's important to review the program every 3 to 5 years to be able to qualify that. Is it current? Is it up to date? Did we see a change because of COVID recovery or whatever happens to be in? One of the members of council mentioned the cyclical nature of development, and I can't agree more. That's the reason why we need to continually update this program, but we need to take a shot somewhere. And so the current numbers are based on our present growth as considered over the last 3 years, the OCP and the zoning considerations that are forecast in the official community plan, as well as the zoning considerations that are being actualized through council, whether they either amend or align with the OCP, it's the end number that we're looking at. So no, it is not the intention of staff to propose that the OCP not be regarded.
Thank you.
Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've listened to everybody's arguments here. I think a lot of work has been done. I do think that it is time for us to make these amendments, and I'm going to go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. And that is seconded by Councillor Logan. Councillor Jansen, do you wish to speak to it at all?
No, I think this has been flogged by people smarter than I, but I do appreciate the work done on this, Brent, and I think it covers off any questions I would have.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Okay, I'm just waiting to see if there's any other hands, a discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to bylaws. Bylaw number 9.1. This is bylaw number 1836, development cost charges, roads. This is for first and second reading. Councillor Logan moves it. Councillor Baxter seconds it. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. The motion passes. Moving on to 9.2, bylaw number 1855, main sewer LAS enlargement for 502 Allendale Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition, please raise your hands. Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.3, bylaw number 1856. This is West Sewer LAS enlargement for 502 Allendale Road, and this is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there a discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to bylaw number 9.4. This is bylaw number 1857, main sewer LAS for 651 Carindale Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.5, this is bylaw number 1858, West Sewer LAS enlargement for 651 Carindale Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there a discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.6, bylaw number 1859, Main Sewer LAS for 3236 Machosen Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.7, this is bylaw number 1860, South Sewer LAS enlargement for 3236 Machosen Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Mayor Martin. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to adjournment. Winner tonight is Councillor Logan, still beats Councillor Kobayashi. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes? All right, good night, everybody.